So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the son of Anubis, the Egypt god. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Is it true? Asked Isis as she turned to her son, Horus. Horus didn't answer but merely nodded his head in affirmation. The news would break his mother's heart. She was the goddess and mother of all kings, and yet, now one of her worst fears was being realized. One of her own was dooming the weight of his own heart with every act of violence he committed. Upon death, all were brought before her husband, Osiris. Their heart was placed on the scale of Anubis and weighed against Maat, the feather of truth and justice. If the heart balanced evenly with the feather, then the deceased was found worthy and passed into the fields of Hedep and Iru. However, if the heart was found heavy, the scale would sink and the heart would be eaten by Ammit. It was in essence, the destruction of an unworthy and corrupt soul. I must speak with Anubis, she whispered and rushed from the throne room to find the jackal-headed god that escorted the dead before her husband for judgment. Mother, murmured Horus sadly. Horus watched his mother stride from the throne room in search of Anubis. He knew that this particular heart was more valuable to her than many others. The human that held this heart was one of her personal creations. As close to a son as she could get without birthing him herself. She had stood at the pottery wheel of Khnum and dictated every aspect of him to the ram-headed creator of kings. Rising from his kneeling position, Horus followed his mother at a slower walk. He knew what Anubis would say. If road had reached Horus, then he was nearly positive that even if Anubis altered the scales, it would make no difference in the end. This man was doomed and his mother was only extending her sorrow. Anubis, cried out Isis, the pain in her voice evident. My queen, bowed Anubis. It has come to my attention that one of my beloved children will be unable to pass the weighing of the heart upon his death. I need to know if you can adjust your scales, she pleaded. You ask a dangerous boon. There are reasons that unworthy souls are destroyed. Should they contaminate the fields, more than just the one soul would wither. Said Anubis in a hushed tone. I realize that, but I cannot bear to watch his heart be eaten by Ammit, she whimpered. Anubis felt his heart twinge slightly at the sight of her tear-filled eyes. To even consider such a request went against his very core, but he couldn't resist the pleading look in her eyes. She rarely asked anything of him, while many approached him with their own requests over the many millennia. Isis had never asked a boon. To now witness her approaching him with such a request saddened him. Humans were the bane of creation. He instantly hated the human that had caused such grief in the noble queen's eyes. Come with me, said Anubis, offering his arm to the queen. Anubis escorted Isis and Horus through the many corridors of the palace of the gods. Each god had his or her own domain. Rarely did one venture into that of another without cause. Osiris and Anubis were the only gods with full admittance to all aspects of this realm. Both were closely tied to death and as such were admitted to every realm. Death was a part of life and every other god governed some aspect of life. The deeper they walked, the more apprehensive Isis became. She was largely out of her territory and nearly powerless. Anubis was her only lifeline and she clutched at him with all her strength. Peace, my queen, you need not fear. We are in the realm of Thoth. He will not harm you, comforted Anubis. At the words, Isis eased her grip on her escort's arm and allowed her gaze to scan the corridors. The walls were graced with some of the most beautiful scribed hieroglyphics and images that she had ever seen. To stand before such images, even for an immortal being such as herself, was humbling. Even her son, Horus, seemed entranced by the artwork. Thoth, you have a visitor, announced Anubis. From the shadows of a towering scroll stand stepped the ibis-headed god of wisdom and scribes. His small head tilted to the side in curiosity as he stepped forward and bowed to the queen. Your Majesty, to what do I owe the honor of such a visit? Bowed Thoth. Queen Isis has made a request of me and I would like to see your scrolls on this individual before I can make any decisions, explained Anubis. I see, who am I looking up? Inquired Thoth as he strode to his scribal stand and opened what appeared to be a blank piece of parchment. Anubis turned his eyes to Isis. She bowed her head and thick silken hair fell around her face in a midnight waterfall. She was stunning and more than deserving of the title of queen. Tears pricked her eyes as she whispered the name. Prince Itachi, son of Uchiha, son of Tutmosis III, whispered the queen. Thoth nodded his head and began to write on the blank parchment scroll. Before her eyes, detailed descriptions of his deeds and accomplishments bleed onto the white scroll. Her greatest fear was now written in the red ink of Thoth for all to see. The scrolls of Thoth never lied. Her child was doomed. Even the scales of fate could only be altered so much. All is lost, cried Isis and buried her face in the chest of her son. Anubis refused to believe nothing could be done and began to read the scroll of Itachi. It looked grim, but he was young and his destructive path could be changed. The question was how. Glancing at the weeping queen, Anubis felt his lips pull back from sharp teeth. He would save the child his queen even if it cost him his godhood. Thank you, Thoth, nodded Anubis. I am sorry that I could not be of more assistance. My lady, you are welcome in my realm any time you wish it, bowed scribe before disappearing once again in his great shelves of scrolls and knowledge. Anubis escorted Isis and Horus back to the great throne room and barricaded himself in his own realm, seeking a why to save the heart of Prince Itachi and once again see happiness on the face of his queen. Hours passed like seconds. Despair began to set in his heart. Try as he might, Anubis could not find a way to adjust the weight of the scales so that Itachi's heavy heart would balance with Mayet. It seemed hopeless. Father, Anubis looked up to see the light and joy of his life walk into the room. Hair of sunshine and skin tanned from many hours spent in the fields, the young man approached the fearsome jackal with a carefree attitude. The only visible sign of his heritage were the 3 black whiskers on each cheek. As kind and gentle as he was handsome and wise, the son of Anubis was cherished by all that met him. Around his neck, the boy wore a solid gold necklace from which a beautiful blue crystal dangled. The crystal was the only one of its kind and was a symbol of Anubis's love for his son. Naruto, come here, intoned Anubis. The slender boy approached the fearsome god with no fear or trepidation. To Naruto, Anubis was simply his father. Settling at the feet of Anubis, Naruto waited patiently for his father to explain the reasons for his unhappiness. Naruto, Queen Isis is very sad. One of her human children is in danger of having his heart eaten upon death. So far lost is he that there is no way I can alter the scales to save him. I fear I have failed my queen, started Anubis, sadly. Father, don't despair. There is surely a way to save him. If you cannot save him after death, then can you save him now? Asked Naruto. Anubis looked at his son strangely. It was true that the weight of a heart could be lightened during life, but it was a nearly impossible task. Once an individual received a taste of the darkness, bringing them back to the light was a difficult task. Only the most determined people could reverse the wheels of fate. Looking into the blue sapphires of his son's eyes, he saw such a determination help that even he was astonished. Each god was born with a gift, and Naruto's was the ability to change people for the better. Could his son truly have the strength of will to change the fate of Prince Itachi? An even more difficult question preyed on his mind. Was he willing to let his only child try? Naruto, I have a question for you, began Anubis. Yes, father, asked Naruto. It is a difficult task to stay on the road of goodness and an even more difficult task to reverse damage already done. Do you think he is worth saving? Inquired Anubis, handing a copy of the scroll of Itachi to his son, Anubis watching with interest as Naruto scanned the contents. His son always believed that there was good in all people. Now it was time to see if his son was willing to put that to the test. I believe this man is worth saving, smiled Naruto. Did you even read the scroll? Asked Anubis with a shake of his head. I scanned it, blushed Naruto. Anubis shook his head but stood and gestured for his son to follow. They walked silently down the long dark corridor until they reached a large room. Inside the room was a beautifully decorated archway. Naruto looked around with interest. This was a room in which he had never been allowed. Lights burst from the center of the archway in a kaleidoscope of color. The bursts of color seemed to move in a dance of astonishing beauty. Naruto was captivated by the colors. His eyes never left the dance of lights. Follow me, Naruto, said Anubis as he stepped into the archway, followed closely by his son. The priests that tended the shrine to their lord Anubis burst into a frenzy of excitement at the sight of the terrifying god. Anubis was one of the few gods feared and loved by all, for he represented death and the afterlife. Such a thing was both feared and revered. Everyone would be visited by Anubis at some point. It was only a matter of when. Naruto stepped through and rubbed his eyes to ease the burning that the lights had caused. He watched in amazement as the priests bowed and scraped before his father. Never before had he seen such a show of humility and obedience. It was obvious that his father did not often grace his priests with his presence. "Great Lord Anubis, we bow before you and await your desire," bowed a particularly extravagantly dressed priest. Appears that being a priest is a comfortable position, thought Naruto to himself. Listen carefully, you whom serve me. I present before you my son, Naruto. He is to be treated as a normal priest until he is able to complete the duties I have charged him with. If he should ask assistance, you are to give it without question. He speaks for me in my absence, boomed Anubis, his voice carrying over the entire entrance hallway. Yes, my lord, grumbled the high priest. Anubis turned to his son, and pulled him into a warm hug. Bowing his great head, Anubis inhaled the smell of his son, the most cherished of all his possessions. He feared for his son, but at the same time he knew that Naruto was the only one in which he could trust this monumental task with. Don't worry, father, grinned Naruto. I worry because you are my son, growled Anubis. I know, smiled Naruto. Anubis pulled his son into one last hug before disappearing into the glittering archway. The lights flared one last time before fading into nothing. Naruto turned to face the high priest. The room was silent, as if waiting in anticipation of what was to happen next. Naruto's stomach answered that question by rumbling so loudly that it could be heard across the entire room. Hey, I don't suppose you guys have any food lying around? Asked Naruto with a grin. An elderly priest laughed quietly and stepped forward. He was dressed simply in a white linen kilt, similar to the one worn by Naruto. Naruto smiled at the man and allowed himself to be lead away into the living areas of the temple. X tilde 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 X tilde. Itachi, son of Uchiha, returned to his rooms as the sun hit its zenith. This was the time of year when the grass withered in the sun. Only those plants closest to the life-giving Nile were spared the death touch of the cruel sun. Strolling through the cool rooms, Itachi settled himself on a dais and closed his eyes in weariness. The attacks on his brother and himself had grown in frequency. His uncle, Madara, wanted to take no chances in his accession to the throne. The smell of the flowers from the garden scented the air with a sweet fragrance intended to soothe the heart and minds of the residents of the palace. Feeling his body begin to relax, Itachi began to drift into a peaceful slumber. To the assassin watching the prince, it was the perfect moment to strike. Gripping the poisoned blade in his fist, the assassin crept towards the slumbering man. Raising the blade and with a silent prayer for his strike to be true, the assassin plunged the blade downward only to have his wrist gripped in an unforgiving hold. The assassin's eyes widened at the look of pure malice in the pitch-black eyes of the prince. The touch of madness that hid just under the surface was plainly visible, and the assassin knew that his time left in this life was at its end. Did you think I didn't smell you hiding there? Growled Itachi. Not waiting for an answer, Itachi grabbed the throat of the assassin and slammed him painfully into the wall. Black spots danced before the assassin's eyes as his oxygen was cut off. He dropped the poisoned dagger and began to claw desperately at Itachi's grip. Pray to Osiris and Anubis that your soul isn't devoured, for I will show you no mercy, snarled Itachi before releasing his grip on the assassin's neck. The man fell to the ground gagging and gasping as precious oxygen once again flooded his lungs. The relief he felt was short-lived as his throat was slit by the very dagger he had brought for killing the prince. Gurgling sounds escaped his body as he slumped to the ground. The last thing he saw was the smirking eyes of Prince Itachi as he licked the warm blood that dripped from his pale hand. Everything went dark and the assassin knew no more. Guards burst into the room to see their prince standing over the dead body of a would-be assassin, his eyes dancing with the joy of the kill. Fear crept into each man that witnessed this show of dark madness. None would speak as they feared for their lives more than the reward that telling such a thing would bring. Prince Itachi might be mad, but he was far more devious and intelligent than they. To betray that man would mean more than death. It would mean suffering before he allowed you the blessing of death. No, these men were not foolish enough to throw away their lives for a shiny coin. "My lord," exclaimed one of the guards. "Clean this mess up and send for the royal vizier," ordered Itachi before walking over to pluck a date from a waiting bowl of fruit. Nibbling delicately on the fruit, Itachi strolled around the room as his guards cleaned up the mess left behind by the death of the assassin. The prince smirked at the congealing blood that had spread across the marble floor. Noticing his own blood-splattered kilt, Itachi stripped the soiled garment off and strode towards a chest. From W.H. He pulled a freshly laundered linen kilt. Suddenly the doors of his room were flung open and his brother, Sasuke, strode in. The younger man wrinkled his nose at the sight of the dead man being carted out of the room, leaving behind only a puddle of blood. "Itachi, are you all right?" asked Sasuke. "Of course, why wouldn't I be?" answered Itachi as he took another date from the dish. "You could have been killed. Father would have been devastated, not to mention Uncle Madara would have been given a reason to rejoice," growled Sasuke, worry evident on his face. "It will take more than an unwashed assassin to take me down," purred Itachi. "Father needs to be made aware of this most recent attempt on your life," stated Sasuke. "Then you go tell him. I have business with the royal vizier. Rked Itachi before strolling out of the room towards where the royal vizier waited patiently to obey the will of the young prince. "Most honorable son of the great Pharaoh for whom the sun rises each day, how may I serve you?" grumbled the vizier. Itachi looked at the man with a barely concealed look of disgust. The slimy man had always turned his stomach. It was well known among the palace that he wrinkly old man enjoyed taking his pleasure with children. The thought disgusted Itachi beyond belief. The man brought offerings nearly daily to the various temples to pay for his transgressions. Single quote. "Purchasing his way into the afterlife, no doubt," sneered Itachi to himself. "You told me that the assassination attempts were over and that you had captured the ringleader of the operation," purred Itachi as he strolled in a circle around the sweating man. "My lord, the man confessed to everything. I had no reason to doubt his word," simpered the vizier. I see. I understand. There was nothing that could be done to prevent the attempt that was just made on my life because you made sure that your information was correct," said Itachi. "My lord, the pharaoh must be notified of this attempt. Another murderer has risen to take the place of the one that was executed," gasped the vizier. "My brother is in the process of apprising my father of the recent events. You, however, have some amends to make to me," smiled Itachi. "My lord, please, I beg your forgiveness for inadequately interrogating the criminal," whimpered the vizier from his penitent stance. Forgiveness, a noble concept. The priests preach such nice pleasantries. Never lie, never raise your voice, never kill an innocent man, and your place in the afterlife is assured. But you prey on young children and buy your way into Osiris's good graces with gifts to him before returning to rape yet another child," drawled Itachi. "I'm begging you, my lord. Don't kill me," pleaded the man on his hands and knees. "Now how much do you tell my uncle and I might let you live?" purred Itachi. "I don't know what you are talking about," began the vizier. "Don't lie to me," yelled Itachi, his voice echoing throughout the hall. The man whimpered as tears flowed down his cheeks. Standing before him was the man he feared second only to Madara. The aura of madness that dripped from him in a potent flood was nearly stifling. He knew he would die if he revealed his knowledge, be it by the hand of Itachi or Madara. His death was imminent. "I have been meeting with Lord Madara and he tells me what he wants done. If I don't do as he wishes, I will be killed. I had no choice but to obey him," whined the vizier. "You disgust me and your death would give me the greatest pleasure," smirked Itachi. "My lord, you promised you would spare me if I confessed," cried out the vizier. "I lied. Itachi confessed." Itachi smiled and the blood chilled in the vizier's veins. This was the smile that spelled his death. He only prayed that his offerings were enough to grant him passage into the afterlife. Do you know what this is? Asked Itachi as he waved a bloodied blade before the vizier. A blade? Whispered the vizier. Yes, a blade. And do you know what this blade was used for? Questioned Itachi. No, my lord. He answered. It was used in an attempt on my life. It is only fitting that you should die by this blade, said Ida Kai before plunging the blade into the man's heart. The vizier cried out in pain as blood bubbled from his lips to drip upon the expensive robes that he wore. Blood spread across the front of his robes before he tumbled onto the ground. With his last gasping breath, he cursed Itachi to never be given admittance into the hereafter. Don't bother cursing me, old man. I knew long ago that I would never be admitted into the afterlife. Itachi snorted. Brother, murmured Sasuke. You heard his confession? Asked Itachi. I did, Sasuke answered. Itachi hummed as he walked towards the large window to gaze at the courtyard below. A huge commotion seemed to be going on at the nearby temple of Anubis. Itachi narrowed his eyes, gazed down into the crowd. Several of the high-ranking priests crowded around someone of obvious importance. Itachi pitied the poor fool that had to deal with all those backstabbing priests. The crowd parted and Itachi felt the breath leave his body. Their Ao was perhaps the most stunning young man that he had ever seen. The slender body was adorned simply with a white pleated kilt and a gold necklace. Delicate muscles were pulled tautly over a slender frame and covered with beautiful tan skin. Though he wasn't close enough to see the precise details of his face, Itachi was certain that they would be as attractive as his body. Sasuke, who is that boy? Asked Itachi, mesmerized by the golden creature before him. Sasuke approached the window and looked down in the commotion. His eyes widened at the unusual hair color of the youth. He looked to be around 17 or 18. Though Sasuke was uncertain from this distance. Sasuke glanced at his brother and was surprised to see him staring intently at the young man. Never had Itachi shown so much as the tiniest whisper of interest in any other being, yet now his attention was completely captivated by this one boy. I want him, stated Itachi. Are you fucking mad? It's obvious that he's of some importance to the temple of Anubis, shouted Sasuke. Bring him to me, Sasuke, said Itachi before striding from the room. Sasuke growled to himself before storming from the room towards his quarters to dress for a trip into the town. His father's illness coupled with the assassination attempts and now Itachi's lust was pissing Sasuke off more than a little. He was a fucking prince, not Itachi's errand boy. That boy better be worth all this shit, grumbled Sasuke to himself. Master Naruto, we have been called to the palace to tend to the body of the Grand Vizier, said the high priest. Just Naruto, grinned Naruto as he shuffled through the stalls of the marketplace. Naruto's eyes jumped from stall to stall, taking in every sight and every smell. Everything was so different here. Vendors called out in attempts to snare the attention of possible customers. Naked children ducked and dodged past adults in games of chase. The air was permeated with the sense of cooking food, overripe fruit, and the thick smell of sweat. Naruto was completely captivated by the entire atmosphere. My lord, hissed the high priest. Go on. There is nothing I can do for the man. My duties do not intersect with your own, sighed Naruto in annoyance. My lord, it is my duty as high priest to look after you. Don't forget who you are, argued the high priest. Naruto turned to the priest as his blue eyes tinted a deep red with annoyance. The high priest sucked in his breath. There was power in this boy. To underestimate him would be the last mistake you made. Leave him be, High Priest Rami. We have duties to attend to, urged one of the lower priests. Rami ran a hand over his shaved head and sent a frustrated look towards the blonde that was quickly disappearing in the crowd. If something happened to the boy, Lord Anubis would have his balls for dinner. Such was not a fate he looked forward to. However, as High Priest, his presence was required at all high-profile deaths and the death of the royal vizier was definitely high-profile. Sighing dejectedly, Rami turned and began to make his way towards the palace, each step causing more and more dread to course through his veins. It seemed that the palace was becoming all too familiar with death lately. Naruto looked over his shoulder as the high priest disappeared in the crowd, glad to finally have freed himself from the stifling attention. He was utterly intrigued by this world. The perfection of the fields was in no way comparable to the imperfections of this world. Looking around the bazaar, Naruto was intrigued by the daily life of the people. The sound of children laughing echoed through the air, adding an almost musical tone to the bustling streets. Time passed and all too soon the sun was beginning to sink lower in the horizon, signaling the nearing end of the day. Sighing, Naruto decided to make his way back to the temple. "Out of the way, you low-class scum," a voice shouted. Turning to see what the commotion was about, Naruto laughed when he saw a fat noble being carried through the crowds on a litter by 4 rather large Nubians. Each of the dark-skinned men wore a simple white kilt, and around their necks and wrists were gold bands, signifying their status as slaves. None of them looked particularly happy to be there. He could sympathize with that. He very much doubted he would be happy if he had to carry that large of a man around. A young ragged child ran through the legs of the Nubians, causing the litter to tilt, spilling the nobleman on the dusty street. The fat man struggled to his feet with the help of one of his slaves and approached the quivering child. Raising his hand, he readied to strike the child. The blow never fell. Naruto saw the events and leapt towards the fat noble, grabbing the pudgy wrist in a vice grip. The man swung around and sneered at Naruto. "How dare you interfere?" snarled the man. "You shouldn't hit the child. It was an accident," argued Naruto. "It's my right to hit whomever I want." "You insolent boy, grab him," he ordered. Before Naruto could blink, 2 of the Nubians had Naruto's arms and his struggles were useless. "I've been wanting a new slave. I will make you mine as reparation for assaulting me," leered the fat man. Naruto turned his head and wrinkled his nose as the fetid breath washed over him. A fat, sweaty palm brushed over the skin of his chest and he cringed. Feeling the bile churn in his stomach, Naruto bit his lip and tamped down the surge of power that rose just beneath his skin. It wasn't his right to take a life, even one as disgusting as this one. Just as the pudgy hand neared the belt of his kilt, a voice called out over the crowd. "What goes on here?" asked an annoyed voice. The crowd parted and bowed low as Prince Sasuke wove his way through the masses, his very presence causing women to nearly swoon. Prince Sasuke's dark hair shone in the afternoon sun. His skin was so pale that it seemed out of place in such an arid climate. The prince stood dressed in a pristine white kilt, belted by an intricately woven gold sash. Around his throat were several necklaces of gold and lapis lazuli. Pitch-black eyes were outlined with kohl, bringing attention to the mysterious depths. His face wore a look of superiority that left no doubt to anyone of his status. Sasuke approached the blonde and arched a brow. If he had thought the blonde attractive from a distance, he found him even more beautiful up close. Hair of gold from a distance became a startling mixture of gold, red and pale blonde locks that combined to create the eye-catching color. Looking into the face of the boy, Sasuke was startled at the intensity that swirled in eyes that would shame the most expensive sapphire. He knew without a doubt that Itachi saw the boy up close, he would never let him go. If nothing else, his brother was possessive. "Prince Sasuke," acknowledged the nobleman. "Who is the boy?" asked Sasuke as his eyes continued to stare intently at Naruto. "My new slave, my lord. He dared to assault me, so I took him as my slave as punishment," explained the fat man. "Who gave you the right to pass judgment?" snarled Sasuke. It wasn't that Sasuke particularly cared about the daily life of the lower classes, but his heart nearly stuttered in his chest at the nobleman's words. If he hadn't come when he had, there was a very good chance the blonde would have been spirited away, never to be seen again. Sasuke loved his brother, but he didn't want to be the one to tell him that he had been unable to find the blonde. His brother wasn't the sanest individual when it came to being denied something he wanted, and Sasuke had a keen sense of self-preservation. "My prince, that's the way it has always been. Please forgive my presumptuousness," simpered the man. See that you remember that the next time you seek to throw your very substantial weight around," smirked Sasuke. "Yes, my prince," pouted the nobleman. Sasuke iced him with a wave, and the nobleman turned to climb onto the litter once more, but paused at Sasuke's words. "Oh, by the way, I'll be taking the boy with me. The first prince has taken a shining to him," announced Sasuke. Sasuke hid the inner cackle of glee at the way the disgusting man's face became splotched in his anger. The Nubians looked at each other in uncertainty before releasing Naruto. and lifting the litter with heavy grunts. The Nubians proceeded to carry their master towards his home. The fat man cracked his crop on the shoulder of one of the dark-skinned men, obviously seeking to take his frustration out on the slave. Naruto watched as the fat man was carried away. He released a sigh of relief. Turning to the smirking Sasuke, Naruto bowed low to the raven-haired prince. "You are an idiot to risk your freedom for a street child," said Sasuke with a shake of his head. "Many thanks for freeing me from his clutches, but I just couldn't allow him to strike the child," said Naruto. "Just as I thought, an idiot." Naruto felt his brow twitch at the insult. Biting the inside of his jaw, Naruto bowed again and turned to leave, only to be stopped by the guards that followed Sasuke. Confused, Naruto turned to face the smirking man. "Where do you think you are going?" asked Sasuke. "Back to the temple," answered Naruto. "I don't think so. I wasn't lying when I said my brother wanted you. You will be coming with me." Quote, "I'm not going anywhere with you, bastard," growled Naruto. "Come with me quietly or I will have the guards lash you for insulting a son of the Pharaoh," hissed Sasuke. "I am returning to the temple," said Naruto stubbornly. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at the blonde. He dared to take such a tone with him, the son of Pharaoh. Normally, Sasuke was a bit more calm-natured than his brother. For some reason, though, this blonde seemed to be able to push all his common sense over the edge of reason. "Bring him," ordered Sasuke to the head guard. The guard signaled for his fellow guards to bring the boy. Naruto let out a screech of indignity and struggled against the firm hands of the guards. He felt his control starting to slip. Unable to resist, Naruto laid his head onto the arm of one of the guards with his slightly enlarged canines. The man released a yell and struck the blonde hard across the face. Sasuke swung around in time to see the blonde collapse onto the dirt unconscious. A trickle of blood dripped from his lips to stain the ground. Sasuke nearly flew into a rage. When Itachi saw the boy damaged, there would be hell to pay. Storming to the guard, Sasuke struck him across the face. "You idiot! What did I just finish telling that foolish noble? This boy belongs to Prince Itachi. He will not be happy if he's damaged," Sasuke practically yelled. Itachi wouldn't be happy and Sasuke would be the one to have to deal with his rage. It wasn't a pleasant duty. Clenching his hands into fists, Sasuke closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. "Forgive me, my prince. It was an instinctual reaction when he bit me," cried the guard as he fell to his knees before the prince. "You know that you will need to be punished. 10 lashes to be received upon returning to the palace. I suggest, for your sake, you pray very hard to whatever god or goddess you favor that my brother is content with that," sighed Sasuke. "Yes, my prince," groveled the guard. "Pick him up. Nothing can be done at this point," ordered Sasuke before turning once again to make his way towards the palace. Once in the palace, Sasuke ordered the boy placed in one of the bedrooms near Itachi's suite of rooms. "Lock him in and post guards at all possible exits. I'm taking no chances with him. If he escapes, it's you that will answer to Prince Itachi, not I," warned Sasuke before walking to his own rooms. Slumping on a dais near the window to the gardens, Sasuke closed his eyes and lifted fingers to his temples. The headache that had been just under the surface since being ordered to find the boy was now a full-blown migraine. He was dreading the altercation with Itachi when he saw the bruised jaw of the boy. There was no denying that the guard that struck the boy was in very deep shit. Sasuke prayed that Itachi could be reasoned with. "You seem stressed, little brother," commented a voice so rich, it could have been labeled as a dessert. "If it wasn't for the fact that father would greatly mourn your death, I would kill you myself and save Uncle Madara the trouble," groaned Sasuke without opening his eyes. Sasuke had long grown accustomed to the silent movements of Itachi. If Itachi didn't want you to hear him, you wouldn't. Not even Sasuke could claim to have such skill of movement. It was almost as if Itachi was graced by the gods. "Can I assume you completed the task I asked of you?" queried Itachi. "You know very well I did. There is not a single footstep taken in this palace that you aren't aware of," scowled Sasuke. Itachi laughed wryly at the comment. If only that was true. Then he would have long since put an end to the assassination attempts on the royal family. Their father was going old and weak. Uncle Madara was gaining influence with the more debauched nobles. If only his father would listen to reason and banish their conniving uncle. Itachi looked at his brother. He looked so much like their mother. Itachi favored their father more in appearance. Both had taken the death of their mother hard. Sighing inwardly, Itachi pushed aside the twinge of pain that burst in his chest. There was no place in his soul for such weak feelings. "You spoke with the boy?" asked Itachi. "I don't know if you could call it speaking," joked Sasuke. "What would you call it?" asked Itachi with an arched brow. "I don't know, but I am sure you will experience it soon enough," smirked Sasuke. Itachi mirrored the arrogant smile though it never reached his eyes. Sasuke shivered a little at the dead look in Itachi's eyes. The deep-set orbs reflected nothing but emptiness coupled with a hint of madness. Such eyes hinted at a darkness that was found lurking in the mind. "Where is he?" asked Itachi, rising from his chair. "I put him in one of the rooms near your suite. It will be the one with the most guards," smirked Sasuke. Both strode down the marble hallway, pausing before the heavily guarded door. Itachi arched a brow at his brother. "Is this really necessary? He's only one boy." Itachi arched a brow at his brother. "You have no idea," grumbled Sasuke as the guards bowed and parted, allowing the two to enter the room. A delicate-smelling ghee incense burned in a bowl situated in the corner of the room, sending up a slightly spicy fragrance. The room was lit only by a single oil lamp, giving the large room a shadowed appearance. The blonde was lying unconscious on the bed, sprawled out in a carefree position. Itachi strolled closer. His sharp eyes took in every inch of the boy. He noted the unblemished skin and the intricate colors of his hair as each strand caught the light of a nearby lamp. Firm muscles shifted beneath soft skin, tightening and relaxing unconsciously as the blonde moved restlessly on the bed before drifting off again. The marks on his cheeks, reminiscent of whiskers, seemed to give him an almost animalistic appearance. "He's perfect," breathed Itachi. "He's a pain in the ass," snorted Sasuke as he settled himself in a chair. Itachi smirked at his brother before turning his eyes back to the vision laid out before him. He felt a thud in his chest at the innocent way the boy slept. He slept as if he had not a care in the world. His eyes were tracing the delicate facial features when the beginning of a dark bruise caught his eye. Itachi scowled and gently grabbed the boy's chin and tilted the face to get a better look. "Who did this, Sasuke?" snarled Itachi. Sasuke lifted a hand to bridge of his nose. He had hoped that in the darkened room, Itachi would fail to notice the bruise on the boy's jaw. Wishful thinking, he supposed. There was very little that Itachi missed. "A guard," muttered Sasuke. "A guard struck what is mine," snarled Itachi. Sasuke flinched at the darkness that bled into his brought hers eyes until they seemed to glow with an unearthly flame. This was why he'd hoped the boy wouldn't bruise. Itachi was going to go on a rampage if damage control wasn't implemented. "Leave it, Itachi. He's been punished," stated Sasuke. "Not by me," growled Itachi. "The boy wasn't scarred, so leave it be." The guard received 10 lashes, which, may I point out, is double that of the normal punishment for such a minor offense, said Sasuke in an attempt to placate his brother. Itachi scowled, but the fire faded from his eyes, leaving only dark nothing. Sasuke was almost sad to see it go. Itachi W. as unpredictable when in such a state, but at least his eyes held something more than madness. A moan from the bed drew 2 pair of black eyes. Dark lashes fluttered open to reveal twin sapphires. Itachi watched intently as the boy sat up and blinked owlishly at his surroundings. "Where am I?" asked the boy. "The palace," answered Sasuke. The boy seemed confused for several seconds before shooting an angry glance towards Sasuke. The prince returned the look. Itachi looked on in amusement at the death glares being shared between his brother and the object of his infatuation. "What is your name, boy?" asked Itachi. Naruto glanced at the taller man. His deep voice was smoother than the finest tanned hide. The touch of it on his ears sent shivers through his entire being. He was slightly embarrassed. The man's voice mesmerized him as easily as a charmer did a snake. "Naruto," answered the blonde. "Strange name," Itachi commented. "Only to you," shrugged Naruto. Itachi smiled. Sasuke nearly fell out of the chair. Itachi smiled. It was not the blood-hungry smile of madness, nor was it the arrogant smirk of his status. This smile was real. I think I'll go back to the temple now," said Naruto, easing from the bed. I don't think so, smirked Itachi. The prince grabbed Naruto's arms in a powerful grip, preventing any escape. The blonde struggled, but the grip was unrelenting. When the struggles had lessened, Itachi lifted a hand and gripped Naruto's jaw harshly. Naruto winced at the grip. You belong to me now. I belong to no one. Naruto began his struggles anew. Don't fight it. I can be a kind master. Itachi purred in Naruto's ear. Naruto shivered as the breath whispered across his ear, teasing the tiny hairs that rimmed it. There was something so compelling about this man. Who was he that he could gain his obedience with the sound of his voice? My prince. Itachi lifted his head from Naruto and glanced at the servant. The young boy nearly died of fright. Quivering, under the unrelenting gaze of the first prince, Intef prostrated himself before the prince. Why have you disturbed us? Snarled Itachi. My lord, the pharaoh wishes a word with you. Sasuke, make sure he stays put while I'm gone. Drawled Itachi. The servant cringed as Itachi strolled by. Itachi looked down at the cowering servant with an arched brow. From now on you will serve Naruto as his personal servant. Barked Itachi before exiting the room. Well, that went well, commented Sasuke. Well, I'm trapped here by you and that person while I still have a mission, hissed Naruto. Sasuke rolled his eyes and held out a hand. Almost instantly, Intef rose to his feet and poured a drink for Sasuke. The raven-haired prince smirked and watched Naruto while sipping the tangy beverage. What are you looking at? You bastard! Growled Naruto. Sasuke frowned. That was the second time today the little shit had called him a bastard. This was really getting annoying. Didn't he know the proper way to address royalty? Honestly, I don't know what Itachi sees in you. You have got to be the most annoying idiot that I have ever met. Itachi. Naruto's head jerked up and he streaked at Sasuke as if he had grown a new head. My brother, the first prince. Your master. Naruto felt faint. Sitting once more on the dais, he gripped the soft material until his knuckles whitened under the strain. That was Itachi. That was the man his father had sent him to save. You look as if you see a spirit, commented Sasuke. Not a ghost, whispered Naruto. Well, don't try to escape. Itachi is not someone you want to anger. He is very possessive of his property and for the time being, you are his property. I would suggest you make the best of this. If you play your cards right you could live a very comfortable life even after he tires of you, smirked Sasuke. No one owns me. Sasuke smirked but exited the room leaving Naruto alone with the servant. Glancing at the young man standing nearby awaiting a command, Naruto sighed. How had he gotten himself into this? Master, is there something I can get for you? Food, drink, games, asked Intef. What's your name? Intef. Master, I'm Naruto. How old are you? Intef. I have seen 13 floods, master. So young and yet in this world, the young were made to grow up so quickly. Compared to the boy, he was ancient. Time passed so differently in the fields. Master, I don't really need anything. The boy seemed to wilt. His whole purpose in life was to serve his master. Usually there was always something to do, some chore to accomplish. Intef slumped where he stood. This was a huge promotion for him and there was nothing he could do to please his master. Naruto noticed the unhappy look of the servant. He supposed, it wouldn't hurt to give the child something to do. I suppose I could eat something. It's been a while since I ate anything, offered Naruto. Intef leaped into action, rushing from the room so fast Naruto thought he must have wings on his feet. The boy was so determined to please his master that Naruto feared he might return with a feast instead of a small meal. With the servant gone, Naruto drew his legs up and rested his chin on his knees. What to do? He now knew the face of the heart he must save. He recalled the dark eyes that had pierced through his soul. There was something dark that lured there and Naruto feared that it may be too late to salvage him. Naruto felt a small tear leak from his eye at the thought of failing his father. This was the largest request his father had ever made of him and now he feared that he wouldn't be able to complete his mission. Curling onto the soft bedding, Naruto was comforted by the sounds of the birds singing in the gardens. The wind filtered out the windows and brought with it the faint scent of lilies that combined with the incense to tease the senses. Breathing in deeply, Naruto allowed his mind to relax and soon felt himself drifting into slumber. So relaxed was he, that he never noticed the dark eyes that watched him silently through the window. Itachi breathed deep of the fresh night air as he stepped from the ornate doors that led to the personal chambers of the pharaoh. The smell of sickness still lingered in his nostrils despite the heavy incense that was burned day and night, or perhaps it was the overpowering smell of incense that lingered. Either way, he was glad to be away from the room. The many priests and healers that had been paraded before the sick pharaoh had offered no remedy for his illness. If anything, they made his illness worse. The most they offered was advice to begin preparing himself for the afterlife. Itachi snorted. His father feared for his soul just as did every member of their society. Itachi believed none of it. If there were truly gods and goddesses, then why did they not take more of a hand in the lives of those that idolized them instead of hiding away and leaving mere mortals to their own devices? He felt a twinge at the thought of his father's death. He supposed he loved his father, or at the very least felt some affection for him. He wasn't sure though. Itachi wasn't the sort to feel much of anything. He had felt very little for a long time. Not since that day had he allowed any emotion through the thick wall he'd erected around his soul. Even now he could remember the smell of burning flesh and the screams for mercy that fell on deaf ears. Itachi thought back on the day that had shaped him into what he was today. In an effort to teach his son about the role he would take upon his father's death, Pharaoh Uchiha had decided to bring his son with him to witness the execution of tomb robbers. His brother was still suckling at their mother's teat and was spared the pleasure of seeing death. The pharaoh had pried his young son from the skirt of his wife and forced the boy to follow him to the site of judgment. The condemned, a tomb robber family, were brought before the pharaoh and priests. To rob the tombs of royalty was one of the most heinous crimes that one could commit against society. Once judgment had been finalized, the condemned were to be burned, effectively destroying their bodies and therefore any chance of being allowed into the hereafter. Only the most severe crimes warranted this punishment, and tomb robbery was such a crime. Itachi recalled the cries for mercy as the family was led to their deaths. He could still smell the acrid scent of burning bodies, and the screams of the child that was no older than himself continued to echo in his ears. When he tried to turn his eyes from the horrendous sight, the pharaoh had struck him across the face and ordered that he not turn his eyes away, threatening severe punishment should he look away even once. So, Itachi had looked on as the flesh bubbled and peeled from the bodies of the criminals. He'd watched as the small girl went limp, her young body no longer able to withstand the heat of the flames. He'd wondered if the gods were so cruel to deny someone so young the afterlife because of the actions of her family. A silent, single tear had trickled down his face, the only tear shed for those dying before his eyes. You must not wear your emotions, Itachi. Bury them deep. There should be no sign of weakness visible as pharaoh. You will take my place as pharaoh one day and you must be prepared. The words still rang in his ears to this day. After that day, Itachi effectively shut off any and all emotion save the most basic. He became as the stone statues that lined the temples. He trained himself to feel nothing, and in doing so, opened the door to the madness within. It was so easy to let the darkness rule him. As long as he didn't feel anything, it didn't matter. Then on E-Day his eyes caught a flash of yellow in a crowd of black. The blonde seemed to draw everyone around him like flies to honey. The contrast between the two of them was so distinct that from the moment he had seen the blonde, he knew that he was meant to be BHISB. Striding down dark halls lit only by flickering flames that danced shadows on the walls, Itachi once again approached the heavily guarded room of his newest acquisition. Pushing open the doors, he strode into the dark room once more. The servant jumped at the presence of his lord and fell to his knees, brow touching the cool marble floor. Lord Itachi, how may I serve you? Leave, seek your bed and return to his side tomorrow. Itachi wasn't in the mood to deal with a doting servant. Intef scrambled to his feet and fled the room with quickness. Lord Itachi was not known for his patience. He felt a twinge of pity for his sleeping master. He prayed that Master Naruto had the strength to withstand the madness of the first prince. Itachi glanced at the food that had been placed on a table before looking towards the dais. Again, Naruto was sleeping soundly as if he had no fears. Intrigued, Itachi approached the sleeping blonde and stood over where he lay. Running slender fingers across the whisker-like marks that graced each cheek, Itachi watched as the boy's nose crinkled and a hand rose to brush absently at his face, attempting to relieve the tickling touch. Waiting until the blonde relaxed once more, Itachi trailed fingers down a long smooth neck, following the line of his throat until he reached the pulse that thrummed at the base. Resting his fingers over the thrumming pulse, Itachi felt the life flowing through Naruto. It would be so easy to snuff out that life as the boy lay trustingly before him. Unlike himself, Naruto represented innocence and life. He wanted to own every part of the boy, not destroy him. He wanted that light that burned so bright to soften his own darkness. "Who are you that you have bewitched me with your presence?" whispered Itachi to the silent room. Withdrawing his fingers, Itachi settled himself in a chair near the dais and watched the sleeping Naruto. His eyes never wavered in their intensity. His mind memorized every visible line on the sleek body before him. Every valley, every curve, and every visible inch of skin was committed to his memory. Just being in his presence eased the emptiness a little. The darkness seemed a little less consuming. Whatever the cause, whether it be the blonde or not, Itachi didn't want to lose this subtle feeling of humanity that being around Naruto gave him. And so he remained, sitting quietly until Nut, goddess of the sky, prepared to birth the sun and start the new day. Just before the dawn, Itachi stood. His obsidian gaze slid one last time over Naruto before he exited the room. He knew he would return again and again. Naruto blinked, his eyes open as the first rays of sun shot across the horizon, spreading color across the sky in hues of pink and orange. Such a beautiful sunrise, mother must be in a good mood. Stretching sleep-sluggish muscles, Naruto climbed from the dais and shivered slightly as his feet met cool marble. Glancing around the room, Naruto noticed an array of fresh fruit and a pitcher of cool water on a small table. Popping a few grapes in his mouth, Naruto walked slowly around the room. Now that the dawn had broken across the sky, the palace was filled with light. The lavishness of the room surprised Naruto. Smooth marble floors met intricately painted walls, decorated with various scenes of gods and goddesses. Naruto grinned at how appropriate this room was. A large doorway, covered by only a thin material, led into a spacious private garden for Naruto's solitary enjoyment. High walls prevented thieves and bandits from sneaking in the palace. A small fountain gurgled softly as small birds washed themselves in the cool water. Lilies and chrysanthemums littered the garden, providing beauty and color. "Master Naruto," chimed Intef from the interior. "Here, Intef." Naruto was reluctant to leave the garden. "Master, I have brought you fresh bread as well as honeyed dates and figs." The rumbling in his stomach would not be ignored. Grinning, Naruto made his way inside to where Intef was setting up the food next to the fruit. Plucking a date from the platter, Naruto relished in the sticky treat. Breaking off small bites of bread to accompany the fruit, Naruto ate his fill. Once his appetite was satiated, Naruto stood and took the sprig of mint and water offered by Intef. Chewing contemplatively on the herb, Naruto wondered what he would do now. Guards were posted at every door that led away from this room. He could possibly sneak out, but leaving would not help him in what he was sent to do. However, leaving Itachi with the upper hand wouldn't help either. "What are you doing?" Naruto turned to see Prince Sasuke lounged in a chair. Dressed much similar as the day before, Prince gave off an air of superiority that grated on Naruto's nerves. Thinking, Naruto cast a glimpse at Sasuke before continuing his contemplations. "It thinks," chuckled Sasuke evilly. "What do you want, bastard?" sniped Naruto. "I will have you know that my father and mother were married at my birth, idiot." Sasuke was seriously developing an annoyed twitch whenever in the presence of the blonde, though he could only blame himself for coming back for more. "I call them as I see them," grinned Naruto. He really did like riling the younger prince. I suggest you learn to hold your tongue around Itachi. He's not to be trifled with. Trust me when I say, you don't want him showing you your place." It appeared to Sasuke that the blonde didn't realize just how precarious of a position he was in. He would learn soon enough. "I'll be the judge of that." Naruto really hated being told what to do. "Suit yourself," smirked Sasuke. Sasuke left Naruto to think on his words. Was he really so bad that even his brother felt the need to warn him? Master, are you well? I'm confused, Intef. Is Prince Itachi really so bad? Naruto wasn't sure if the servant could help, but any insight into the object of his mission was welcome. I'm not sure. Intef struggled with indecision. He wanted to help his master, but he also didn't want to draw the ire of the prince. It's all right if you don't want to say anything. Naruto smiled. Lord Itachi scares me. Intef attempted to describe the feeling he got when in the same room as Itachi. I'm what, child? Intef released a small whimper and prostrated himself before Itachi, who had entered the room as silently as a shadow. Forgive me for speaking of you in such a way, Prince Itachi. The fear radiating from the boy was nearly palatable. Such a crime is punishable by death, or perhaps I should have your tongue removed so that you can never speak ill again. Itachi gazed down at the quivering boy with emotionless eyes. The servant's whimpering became louder. Leave him alone. Naruto stood from where he sat and strode to where the boy was beginning to cry with terror. You dare speak to me while I discipline a servant? Itachi lifted his lifeless eyes to Naruto. Naruto sucked in his breath. Never in his existence had he ever seen such emotionless eyes. What had happened to him to create such blankness in his soul? He was only answering a question I asked of him, sniffed Naruto, pushing Intef behind him. I see, so it is you who should be punished. Naruto felt a trickle of fear shiver down his spine. He had seen some of the darkest things in the world, but never had he been afraid until now. I frighten you, smirked the prince. Nothing frightens me, Naruto said, firmly. Itachi smiled. Never in his memory had another person stood up to him. All fell before him in either fear or death. Even Sasuke gave him a wide berth, always allowing Itachi to make the first advance. No one has ever stood their ground with me, mused Itachi. Maybe they should. Then you wouldn't think you should always get your way. I'm the first prince, son of the Pharaoh. I always get my way. Itachi was beginning to really enjoy this. It was amazing how determined the boy was. The servant remained quivering on the floor while Naruto stood his ground, eyes firmly locked with Itachi's. What would you give me if I was to forgive this little incident? Smirked Itachi. Pardon. Naruto's brows shot up into his longish bangs. You heard me. What do you want? Asked Naruto, cautiously. The smile that crept on Itachi's face was similar to that of a beast that had just cornered a prey. Keeping his gaze steady, Naruto refused to allow him the pleasure of seeing him sweat. I want all of you. I want your skin and your hair. I want your laughter and your tears. I want every inch of your entire being to belong to me. Itachi watched as surprise spread across tan features. I'm not yours to own. Itachi frowned at the statement. In a movement nearly too fast to see, Itachi had Naruto pressed against the cool stone wall. His long fingers encircled the slender tan neck and squeezed slightly, though not enough to cut off blood or air. Itachi stared deep into the blue orbs shining defiantly up at him. A smile crept along the corners of Itachi's lips. Such fire hidden behind innocence, it was going to be fun bringing that fire to the surface more often. We shall see. You are free to roam the palace, but you cannot leave the grounds without my permission. Itachi watched the wheels spinning in Naruto's mind. Taking this moment of distraction, he traced his fingers along the line of Naruto's throat, once again savoring the feel of the smooth skin. An Intef, he's your servant, do with him as you please. Itachi regrettably released Naruto and walked towards the door before turning his emotionless eyes back to Naruto. Don't disobey me, I can be cruel. Naruto slumped as the door slid shut behind Itachi. His heart was racing and his knees were weak from the altercation with Itachi. Pressing a hand to his throat, Naruto followed the touch and shivered as he recalled Itachi's eyes and the flash of something he couldn't name. Glancing at Intef, Naruto noticed the quivering boy still knelt, as silent tears trailed down his face. Kneeling beside him, Naruto pulled the shaking shoulders into a warm embrace. His hands rubbing gently on the almond-colored skin. Slowly, the shivering stopped and the boy pulled away from Naruto's arms. Forgive me, Master. I told you to call me Naruto. Forgive me, Master Naruto, whispered the boy, his voice slightly stronger. That will do for now, I suppose. Naruto smiled. He said I could explore the palace. Do you want to come with me, Intef? I will remain here and await your command, Master Naruto, said Intef firmly, having regained his composure. All right, I'll be back in a little while, said Naruto, before exiting the room. Opening the door and poking his head through, he saw 2 guards stationed at the door. Both guards were facing forward, but he knew they were aware of his presence. Arching a brow, Naruto walked out of the room and turned to face the 2 guards. Neither moved, standing as if statues. Both guards were dark-skinned and probably of Nubian descent. Their armor shone brightly in the light. Naruto stood watching them for several minutes, his head tilted to the side similar to that of a curious puppy. Walking forward until he was toe-to-toe with the guard on the right of the door, Naruto shoved his face directly against the guards until their noses touched. A slight snicker was heard from the second guard, but when Naruto turned his head to face the other, the guard was once again facing forward, unsmiling. Grinning, Naruto abandoned the guard and looked around the hallway. His eyes widened. Even the halls were intricately adorned with carved and painted scenes. Wandering the halls, Naruto watched as servants eyed him warily. Frowning, Naruto began to stroll aimlessly through one passage and another. He couldn't shake the feeling that Itachi was more than what he seemed. Once graced by a goddess, one wasn't natural. Taken in by the darkness that dwelled in the deepest caverns of the heart. Before Naruto realized, he was standing before huge ornate doors. They looked to be solid gold and depicted the sun shining behind the image of the pharaoh. Like his own door, this one bore 2 guards, each of them watching him like a falcon. What business have you here, boy? Asked the taller of the 2. Where's here? Naruto was confused. Was this some special room belonging to the pharaoh? What's your business here? Repeated the guard. I was just. Naruto never got to finish the sentence. Both guards looked at each other and began to converse in a tone too low for Naruto to distinguish. He was only able to catch phrases here and there. Bit strange in appearance. Must be from the temple. Anubis. Prepare the soul. Looks young. Pardon me, but could you tell me what you are discussing? Naruto was even more confused and was about to turn and leave the 2 when large hands gripped his biceps. Hey, what are you doing? You must be who the temple sent to help the pharaoh put his affairs in order. Please come with us. Naruto was in such a state of shock that he could do no other than be pulled by the 2 into the darkened room. The smell of sickness, barely covered by the thick scent of incense, nearly knocked Naruto to his knees. Great Pharaoh Uchiha, a priest has been sent by the temple of Anubis. Both guards knelt before the draped dais, drawing Naruto along with them. Naruto watched wide-eyed as a nearly skeletal figure drew up from the scattered pillows and raised a weak hand in acknowledgement. Leave us. The voice was weak and raspy. I think there has been some mistake. I do come from the temple, but come to me, son of Anubis, child of Nut. Naruto felt his wide end to almost comical proportions at the words. How did this human see his lineage? The raspy voice chuckled and gestured for Naruto to approach. Walking gingerly towards the body lying upon the soft linen, Naruto gasped at the sight. It was apparent that the man had once been handsome. A ghost of who he had been passed before Naruto's eyes, and he nearly cried as the virile image faded into the skeletal form before him. How do you know who I am? Whispered Naruto. When you live on the edge of the living and the afterlife, you can see more than what is on the skin. I know you do not come for me. I may be Pharaoh, but I know that not even I am worthy to be escorted by the son of Anubis. No, I do not come for you. The pharaoh's body seemed to convulse as his body attempted to expel the thick mucus that had taken up residence in his lungs. Naruto grabbed a goblet of watered-down wine and offered it to the pharaoh. The man sipped lightly of the drink before waving it away. You honor me, son of Anubis. Though I think you would be more appropriately called, son of Nut. You favor her more than your father. Another coughing spell interrupted the words before the old man collapsed in exhaustion. Lord Pharaoh, you must rest. I'm sorry to have bothered you. Naruto turned to leave. You come for my son. Naruto froze. His heart stopped in his chest and his eyes shot to meet the watery black eyes of the pharaoh. Don't speak, just listen to me. I need this to be said before I am no longer able. Naruto nodded and sat in a chair near the dais. After a few moments of gathering his energy, the pharaoh began. I am to blame. I pushed my oldest son. I forced him to become the emotionless man he is today. I know that I destroyed what was one of my two greatest treasures, and I know that such a deed may cost me my heart, but I am willing to pay that price if my son can be saved. Coughing again, Uchiha lifted a stained linen cloth to his lips and dabbed at the blood that began to dribble down his chin. It isn't your fault. Naruto attempted to comfort the man. The pharaoh shook his head adamantly as his body was once again racked by coughs. The blame is on my heart for wanting to create a leader that would not be run by his emotions. Instead, I created a being that had none. All is lost and I am doomed to die knowing that I destroyed not only myself but my son as well. Lord Uchiha, I have been sent to save your son. I promised my father that I would succeed and I never break my oath. That is my way of the heart. You may rest easy knowing that. Naruto stated firmly. You are as ferocious as your father. I see he gifted you with his determination. Smiled the dying pharaoh. Naruto smiled at the compliment. You still have some time in this world. Allow me to ease it, if only slightly. Asked Naruto. The pharaoh nodded and Naruto laid his hands upon the bony chest. His body shivered at the pull of death. He, like his father, felt death very easily. To the it was like a living essence that flowed through every living thing. Running fingers along the bony protuberances of ribs, Naruto felt some of his power leak into the weakened body. He couldn't save him. Such talents were out of his grasp, but he would be able to ease the suffering of the man. Slowly, as the warmth faded into the pale skin, Naruto noticed the easier breathing and more relaxed appearance of the pharaoh. Stepping back and smiling gently, he watched as tired eyes glanced up at him with relief. I can't heal you, that is not within my power. I merely eased your suffering. When my father's servants come to escort you before Osiris, fear not, for the weight of your heart will balance. Trust me to see to your son in your absence. I promise that his heart will balance as well and I always fulfill my promises. Naruto was determined to fulfill that promise. The man's lids began to droop, comforted by the words, and he nodded lazily before slipping into the first restful sleep he'd had in months. Take care of my son, whispered the man, before completely falling into slumber. I will. Naruto stood at the bedside for several minutes going over the words spoken as well as those left unspoken. Watching the slow rise and fall of the thin chest, Naruto sighed and sent a prayer to his father for the safety on the journey that the pharaoh would take very soon. Naruto stayed by the sleeping man until he was certain that he was resting peacefully. Walking from the bedside, Naruto stepped lightly towards the double doors and pushed through. Taking a breath of fresh air, Naruto froze as his gaze locked with those of the blackest obsidian. What are you doing in my father's room? Are you sure he's there? Several of the acolytes came back with testimony from witnesses that admitted to seeing a yellow-haired youth being apprehended by Prince Sasuke and taken to the palace. The palace staff fear Prince Itachi and are closed-lipped about any goings-on behind the doors. High Priest, what would you have us do? Nothing. This is the will of Naruto. What goes on behind the palace walls is out of our hands. Have a few acolytes watch the palace. We will only intervene if it proves prudent to do so. The young priest bowed before High Priest Rami and exited the chamber. Rami sighed and slumped in his chair. Naruto had spoken at length with Rami concerning the mission given to him by his father. Such a task seemed impossible in the eyes of the High Priest. The prince had an intellect that rivaled most scholars but was tainted by the sweet nothing of despair. Itachi was a dangerous man. Far more so than anyone Rami had ever met. The blonde was like a breath of fresh air. He forced light into the soul of everyone he met. Rami only hoped that Naruto didn't lose a part of himself in this task. Naruto, I hope you have your wits about you. You are going to need them when dealing with a viper in his nest. X tilde 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 X. Itachi barely suppressed th. Yawn that threatened to escape as he listened to the petitions of those brought before him. His hand glided absently over the soft fur of one of the many cats that resided in the palace. The cat's given free rein so not to anger Bastet. Stroking the cats also gave him a chance to move without appearing to fidget. His father, in his younger years, was often seen stroking a cat while deliberating with his advisors. Since his father had been forced to his bed as the wasting illness began to take its final hold on him, Itachi took up the mantle and responsibilities of the pharaoh. A title he would have in name as well as actions very soon. Prayers were offered and sacrifices made, but to no avail. The pharaoh continued to wither away before the very eyes of his subjects. The physicians and healers all responded with the same answer. Pharaoh Uchiha, may the light shine upon him, was dying. For the last year, Itachi had gradually been taking on more and more responsibilities from his father. One such responsibility was to hear the complaints of those brought before him. Most of the minor disputes never made it to his presence, as they were handled by the lower-ranking advisors and mediators. Only the most severe or the most high-profile cases were brought before Itachi. Though his face didn't reveal it, Itachi was nearly asleep on his feet. His eyes hardened and he blamed the intriguing blonde for this. If the blonde hadn't been so beautiful to watch, Itachi never would have spent the entire night staring at every inch of him. If the blonde hadn't bewitched him, he would have been well rested before being forced to deal with the petty annoyances of those powerful enough to be brought before him. While the complainants argued their petty case before his ears, Itachi let his mind drift as he revealed in what he would do to punish the blonde for bringing him such distraction. Dark eyes narrowed as images of the blonde bound before him in submission as sapphire-like eyes flashed in defiance. Taming such a creature would be every such an enjoyable task. Lust raced through his bloodstream and cooled in his loins. Only the most powerful restraint kept the physical effects of such thoughts from embarrassing him. Itachi gritted his teeth and clenched his jaw. Prince Itachi. Itachi barely restrained the growl that attempted to force its way up through his throat. Yet again, his restraint was tested because of one little blonde. Closing his eyes for the briefest of moments, Itachi drew from an inner well the restraint to keep from killing the advisor. They were ever so hard to replace. Allow me to clarify, began Itachi, eyes locked on the pudgy body of a noble. You are asking that I force your son to marry the girl that you have betrothed him to, and you, Itachi turned to the second man. A middle-aged merchant. You want me to force said son to wed your daughter whom is carrying his bastard? Yes, Prince Itachi, nodded both petitioners. How did this petty dispute come before me? Is there not enough trouble with the malcontent brewing in the south that you bring this before me? Itachi growled low in his throat at the advisor. Said advisor appeared as if he was about to expire on the spot. Do you have any more sons? Asked Itachi, turning to face the nobleman. Yes, Prince Itachi. Here is my judgment, and as the voice for the pharaoh, this judgment is final. The boy will reap what he has sown and marry the daughter of the merchant. The merchant smirked at the noble who dropped his head in despair. The second son shall be from this day forth be the first son, and as such inherit all that is his father's and what was his brother's, including the betrothal. At this, the merchant lost the smirk on his face. His hope had been to place his daughter into a noble family and have her children inherit the title. Now with the ruling, she would be married only to the second son and inherit nothing. Now, get out. Both men bowed low and exited the building. Neither was completely happy, but neither had completely lost. First Prince Itachi. Don't you think that was a bit harsh to side with the merchant? The advisor swallowed visibly as Itachi swiveled his gaze towards him. I sided with neither. It was a petty dispute that should never have made it this far. You would do well to remember that I am not my father and will judge as I see fit. You would do well in the future to refuse bribes from those wishing to argue before me. With those words, Itachi stood, shed the heavy, formal garments of Pharaoh and exited the receiving chamber. You do realize that noble will remember this ruling and be less likely to back you should war come, smirked Sasuke. Itachi paused beside his brother, who had been watching the events with interest. Sasuke's interest wasn't so much in the dilemma that had been placed before his brother as much as interesting play of emotions across his brother body. Itachi's face rarely revealed emotion, but he could not hide his body language, and Sasuke was an expert at reading Itachi's body language. When the threat of war comes to his doorstep, he will do whatever it takes to keep himself safe, even if it means that he will grovel before me. Sasuke snorted but continued to keep pace with his brother. How are you enjoying your new pet, brother? Smirked Sasuke. If you get tired of him, I could always use another plaything. Sasuke had barely gotten the words out of his mouth before Itachi had him by the hair. Slamming Sasuke, none too gently, against the wall, Itachi released a low growl. Had rumbled from his chest like that of a wild beast. Sasuke flinched at the sound as he struggled to keep his face and body language neutral. Sasuke's coal-lined eyes widened and a trickle of fear raced down his spine. Had he pushed his brother too far? He could care less about the blonde. He seemed too stubborn for his tastes. He was now regretting his teasing of his brother. The wild look in Itachi's eyes told him that though his brother may care about him, he wasn't above killing him if he should attempt to take one of his possessions from him. He belongs to me, growled Itachi. Rage bubbled through his bloodstream. How dare Sasuke make a claim to what was his? How dare he think that Itachi would ever let go of Naruto once he claimed him? For the first time in his existence, he longed for the feel of his brother's life's blood on his hands. Instinctively, his fingers clenched even harder on the tufts of hair between his fingers. My apologies, Itachi. Sasuke wanted to kick himself for stuttering out the apology. It was unbecoming of him to be so shaken by his brother's menacing aura. The malice in Itachi's eyes died and was replaced once more with blank nothingness. He really ASED his brother's hair and stepped away, mentally berating himself for allowing such a small comment, said in jest, to affect him in such a powerful and disturbing way. Never had he struck out in such a way at Sasuke. You would do well not to bait me, Sasuke. I'm in no mood to be fodder for your own amusement. With those words, Itachi strode down the hallway towards his father's rooms. Sasuke SW allowed visibly and ran a hand through his hair, smoothing the tufts that were crushed by Itachi's hand. A bead of sweat trickled down his cheek and he swiped absently at the tickling sensation. His brother was becoming more uncontrollable. If he wasn't careful, Madara would make his move far more quickly than either anticipated. Sasuke feared the outcome of the dispute between Itachi and Madara more than anything else. The victor of their clashing would determine the fate of Egypt. Itachi slowed his pace as he neared the corridor that housed the rooms belonging to the pharaoh. His father had hidden his waning health for several years before finally collapsing under the strain of his role as pharaoh. The continued decline in health forced Itachi to spend several hours a day with the dying man as he prepared his son to take on the role of light to the people. Itachi longed to find the spunky blonde and forego this meeting with his father, but his duties as first prince must be dealt with before he would be allowed to occupy himself with Naruto. Approaching the golden double doors that lead to his father's rooms, Itachi stopped as the guards stepped in front of him and bowed low. "Forgive us, Prince Itachi, but your father is with a priest and cannot be disturbed," explained one of the guards. "I see." Itachi tilted his head and considered returning to his rooms and resting. The zenith of the sun was fast approaching and soon the heat would be sweltering. Most denizens of the Nile country used this time of day to sit and relax. Servants propped their feet up and slaves allowed themselves a moment's respite from their exhausting duties. Only the cruelest of slave owners forced their slaves to work while the sun was at its peak. Itachi was about to turn and leave when one of the large golden doors slid open. For a moment, Itachi wasn't sure he was seeing what he was seeing. His normally expressionless eyes blinked in surprise at the person he saw exiting his father's rooms. Instead of a rickety old priest, there before his eyes was BHISB blonde. Their eyes locked and Itachi was certain he saw a tremor of shock go through Naruto. "What are you doing in my father's room?" Naruto jumped at the question. Itachi tamped down on the urge to grab the blonde. This was Sasuke's fault. He had set off Itachi's more primal nature and now even the slightest thing was likely to push him over the edge. He felt lust coupled with annoyance spread through his system. He wanted to claim the blonde as his own, needed to claim him. Itachi approached where he stood and bent down until his lips just teased the edge of Naruto's ear. "Return to your room and send your servant away." Naruto's eyes darkened slightly, going from a bright, clear blue to nearly violet. Naruto scented lust, radiating from the pale man, and stiffened as his own body responded in tandem. Stiffening his spine, Naruto glared at Itachi. "You don't own me. I would suggest you not test my patience. And IWOULD suggest you stop ordering me around like your own personal pet." Naruto felt his temper flare. He'd had enough of this. Very well. Grab him, ordered Itachi to the two guards that watched the altercation in an uncomfortable silence. Unable to refuse a direct order from their prince, the guards took Naruto's arms in a tight grip. Naruto struggled, but his energy reserves were low from his easing of the Pharaoh's suffering. Healing was not his gift and as such required much more energy from him than an individual gifted in the art. Perhaps I should get you a pretty little collar, pet, Reamer. Itachi and Naruto growled, drawing amused glances from the guards. Take him to his room and have the guards posted there notified that no one leaves or enters but myself. The guards nodded and be gone to escort the scowling Naruto down the long hallway. Itachi watched until he could no longer see the shockingly bright hair of his Naruto. Turning, he faced the doors once more. Disgust flickered across his elegant features as he pushed the doors open. The sickly sweet scent of incense was thick in the air. Itachi thought it no wonder the Pharaoh had trouble breathing. He could barely breathe in the room and he was healthy. The priests praised the healing properties of the incense, but that didn't make the overbearing odor any more pleasant. The diminutive figure on the bed started as the doors shut behind Itachi. Lifting up slightly, Uchiha watched as his oldest son walked the length of the room and bowed before making his way towards the bedside. My son, acknowledged the dying man. You look well, father. The Pharaoh's breathing was less labored and his sunken cheeks held a bit of color. I feel stronger today. Itachi settled himself at the bedside and awaited the words of the Pharaoh. My son, you know that upon my death the nation will be torn between you and my brother. Though my brother lives far to the south, he is amassing strength among the Nubians. The Pharaoh ched for the cup of wine and sipped at the mild drink. There was so much he wanted his son prepared for. Dark times were coming and he would be unable to prevent them. You must unite the nation under your banner and drive out my brother. That is my wish for you. Uchiha coughed lightly into a cloth. Though Naruto had eased the heaviness in his chest, he knew that it was simply palliative treatment. Already, he felt the pull of the other side. He knew that the ship sent to collect his soul had set sail and would be arriving at its docks very soon. It will be as you order, father. Uchiha ked back the tears that attempted to form in his eyes. The emotionless tone of his son tore at his heart. He was at fault for creating such a void in his son. His time was short, but perhaps he could make amends for his past actions. Son of my heart, I wish to make amends to what I did to you. Forgive me, my son, for forcing you to be something you were never meant to be. Forgive me for encouraging you to feel nothing. Itachi started at the words. His heart thumped in his chest and for a moment he longed to fall into his father's arms and cry for the time lost. However, he did not. Instead, he focused seemingly uncaring eyes on the withered form of his father. Father, I am what you made me. I care not for the weak ramblings of a guilt-ridden conscience. Good day, I take my leave now. Bowing low, Itachi exited the room, leaving the weakened Pharaoh to his tears and regrets. The shadows in the room lengthened and Uchiha started as a large shadow stepped forward and bowed low, the neck laces and ornamentation he wore clicking as he moved. Coughing heavily, the weakened man attempted to move away from the jackal-headed creature. The creature held up a hand and a calming balm was soothed over the Pharaoh's consciousness. Rest easy, Pharaoh, I am your guide from this world. My master has sent me to assure your journey is safe. Fear not me, for unlike the rest of this world, I will not leave your side until you stand before Osiris for the final judgment. The servant of Anubis stepped to the head of the dais and simply watched as the Pharaoh relaxed in his presence. The Pharaoh's death would be soon. It was as inevitable as the ebb and flow of the great river from which all life was created. Uchiha closed his eyes and began to drift into a peaceful doze, the gentle words Pharaoh. The fearsome creature soothed his soul, similar to the way he felt in Naruto's presence. His fears and regrets melted away and he was left with only peace. Itachi walked the halls. His mind was dead by the thoughts that the Pharaoh's words elicited. Exhaustion warred with anger to produce a highly volatile Itachi. Sasuke saw the fire burning in his brother and was quick to order the servants to leave him be. He could very well kill someone at this point. Brother, Sasuke, you look tired. The black circles around Itachi's eyes were only deepened by the added coal. The barely contained madness crept out from corners of his mind to flare dangerously in eyes. Perhaps you should retire. Sasuke, I want you to do something for me. Yes, brother, I want you to make sure that no one disturbs me tonight. If they do, I may kill them. Do you understand? Sasuke swallowed but nodded in affirmation. Where are you going? Asked Sasuke, cautiously. Why to play with my pet, as you called him? Itachi didn't wait for Sasuke to respond. He strode determinedly towards the room where his new pet resided. He was growing fond of referring to the blonde as his pet. He paused before door as a thought struck him at how lovely he would look with a gold collar, inlaid with sapphires to match the color of his eyes. A small smile spread across his features at the image. Yes, a collar would look lovely indeed. Ignoring the guards, Itachi pushed open the door and entered to the room. Naruto was nowhere to be seen in the room. Annoyed, Itachi walked deeper inside, taking note of fresh fruit and water that had obviously been left by the servant boy. At least the whelp was good for something. Standing in the doorway to the garden, Itachi spotted the blonde basking in the afternoon sun. The rays of light filtered through his unique hair as he stood soaking up every bit of sun he was able. Itachi felt a calm begin to saturate his blood the longer he gazed on the slender frame. The anger and annoyance of the day was slowly fading as he watched the young man before him. A fine sheen of sweat coated his body, but he looked in no hurry to leave to warm rays. The slender, muscled frame turned and sapphire eyes gazed at Itachi. For a moment Itachi was frozen in his spot. The eyes were so deep that he felt himself being drawn into them. He felt himself losing himself in those astonishing eyes. Naruto said nothing. He'd known the moment Itachi entered the room. He had felt his eyes on him, but the warmth of the sun was too enjoyable to lose. His altercations with Itachi left him mentally drained, and he wanted to postpone the next one as long as possible until he figured out the best route for dealing with the prince. Naruto stared deep into eyes so black that they appeared pupil-less. His aura seemed calm, unlike earlier when it flickered wildly about in a rapid and barely retrained dance. He bowed to the prince but made no move to join him. "What is it about you that soothes my soul?" inquired Itachi after several minutes. Naruto appeared taken aback. He soothed him. He'd never thought he had a soothing presence. Sure, the souls of the fields flocked to him, begging for his attention and input, but he'd always assumed it was his status as Anubis's son that drew them. You don't even realize that you are doing it. Do you play? Itachi gestured to game board of Sanat that was set up in the corner of the garden beneath the shaded awning. Naruto nodded and they made their way to the game board and settled across from each other. The game board consisted of a grid of 30 squares arranged in rows of 10. The winner was the first to move all of his pawns to the other end of the grid. The moves that could be made were determined by the throw stick. Naruto set up his pieces. As the challenged, he was given the first throw. Picking up the stick, Naruto tossed it and the game began. Itachi played the game with the same intensity that he performed even the simplest of tasks. His eyes and mind were focused entirely on the game. He made his moves meticulously, keeping in mind the strategy needed to win along with taking note of the Naruto's plays. The game was largely based on luck, but some skill was involved in determining which pawns to move and where. A lot could be learned about a person by watching them play a game. Small nuisances that would normally be hidden were shown before all that cared to take the time and look. Itachi tended to stroke the edge of the game board with a finger while deep in thought. The elegant digit wool DTs along the edge of the board in an almost erotic motion. Naruto became captivated by the motion and would wait anxiously for the finger to begin again. Though the game was close, in the end Itachi was the victor. Itachi's face wore a self-satisfied look as he lifted his gaze to meet Naruto's. Naruto tilted his head in acknowledgement of Itachi's victory. "You play well. Luck seems to be with you," commented Itachi as he stored his pieces. "My father tells me that I have more luck than a whole temple of priests," grinned Naruto as he followed in suit and stored his pieces in the small compartment. Itachi couldn't resist it anymore. His eyes locked on the long slender fingers and gave in to his desire to touch them. Itachi reached across the game board and stroked the tan fingers that nimbly stowed away the pieces. Naruto jerked at the unexpected jolt that shot through his system. Itachi closed his eyes as he savored the rough texture of the pads of Naruto's fingers before trailing. higher to caress the soft skin of the palm. He finally stopped his journey when he reached the fluttering pulse at the wrist. Resting his fingers over the pulse, Itachi opened and locked eyes with Naruto. He felt the thrumming under his fingers speed up with every passing moment. He saw the clear sapphire blue eyes darken to nearly violet in color. Intrigued, Itachi began to rub his thumb over the pulse, watching with interest as Naruto's eyes deepened even more in color. His eyes broke the contact and zeroed in on the throbbing at the base of Naruto's throat. The pounding of his heart must be hard indeed for his pulse to be visible in at the throat. Gripping the delicate wrist, Itachi pulled Naruto from his chair to stand before him. Naruto tried to fight but soon found himself pulled before Itachi, who remained seated. Itachi kept his eyes locked with Naruto as he lifted the tan hand and pressed his lips against the thrumming pulse. Never breaking eye contact, Itachi began to suck gently, smirking at the obvious rise in the rate of beats. Naruto might try to hide what he was feeling on his face but his body couldn't lie. Naruto sucked in a breath as Itachi bit the tender flesh of his wrist. His blood seemed to have turned to molasses in his veins. The lids of his eyes drooped at the addicting sensations that radiated from his wrist. Itachi swiped his tongue across the reddened skin. Naruto tasted better than he could ever have imagined. The musky natural scent of his skin coupled with the slightly salty taste of sweat was perhaps more addicting than the finest wine, brewed for the Pharaoh's lips alone. What are you doing?" whispered Naruto, his voice husky with the warmth that was constantly spreading through his body. "Tasting my new pet," purred Itachi. Naruto snatched his wrist free at the words. He didn't know why they bothered him so much. Perhaps it was wishful thinking that Itachi would see him as an equal and not some pet to be bought and sold at the whim of the owner. Itachi rose slowly to his feet, the muscles in his bare abdomen clenching and releasing as he reached his full height. Silky unbound hair shifted as he stood, flowing over his shoulders like liquid ink. Naruto resisted the urge to sift his fingers through the blackness to see if it felt as soft as it looked. Walking forward, Itachi pushed Naruto until he was flush against the cool stone wall. Pressing his palms on either side of the blonde's head, Itachi watched confusion shift to surprise and then anger. His eyes were so beautiful when they flashed defiantly at him. "I think I desire a deeper taste of my pet," purred Itachi. Naruto gasped as Itachi's lips descended on his own. In his entire existence, never had he tasted such a flavor. Itachi's lips tasted deep and heady like a fine wine, slightly flavored by the fruit he had eaten earlier. A delicate pink tongue teased the seam of soft coral lips before pressing inside. Naruto offered no resistance. His mind had shut down the moment he felt the touch of Itachi's tongue. He felt as if he was sifting through dense fog that blocked out everything but touch, taste, and pleasure. Moaning into Itachi's mouth, Naruto gave himself over to the raven-haired prince. Itachi felt Naruto lean into his kiss and knew he had the other completely under his control. Slipping deeper into Naruto's lips, Itachi swirled his tongue through the warm mouth, tasting every inch before teasing Naruto's own tongue into play. So engaged was Itachi in the kiss that he failed to notice the guard that entered the room. The clearing of Hroat brought Itachi back into his sense. Itachi released Naruto and whirled to face the intruder, his eyes flashing angrily as the guard began to quiver before him. Stalking towards the guard, Itachi resembled a predator. "Your life now depends on what you say to me at this very moment," snarled Itachi as his fingers crept around the guard's throat and squeezed. "My prince, the Pharaoh had depart. Ed this world and you must join your advisors at once," whimpered the guard. Itachi froze. His father had died. Shock leaked into his mind and was quickly followed by an ache that previously hadn't been there. Itachi clenched his jaw and tamped down the feeling. He was supposed to feel nothing. The Pharaoh had made sure that he felt nothing, and yet a small flame of regret lingered in his heart. His last words to his father had been callous and cruel. Pressing a hand to his chest, Itachi closed his eyes at the unfamiliar sensation. A warm hand on his cool skin returned him to reality. Glancing over his shoulder, Itachi saw the compassionate gaze of Naruto. Anger flared, not at Naruto but at himself for allowing his emotions to be visible for all to see. Shrugging off the hand, Itachi glared at the guard who was nearly groveling before him. With a parting glance at Naruto, Itachi stormed from the room in search of his brother. Sasuke was close to their father as Itachi should have been. Sasuke would be distraught. The only person he trusted in the world was Sasuke, and he needed him in full capacity for the coming days. War was on the horizon and Itachi would need his brother's Suppo. If they were to be victorious against Madara. Naruto bowed his head as he watched Itachi leave. It was beginning. He had seen the flash of pain in Itachi's eyes. Healing of a heart was not something that occurred instantly, and Itachi's heart was so abused that it was barely functioning. Naruto sent a silent prayer for Pharaoh Uchiha. May the waters of the river carrying your soul to the after life be smooth, and may your soul find peace in the fields, prayed Naruto. Returning to his garden, Naruto watched as the last rays of the sun faded from view, leaving only heavy shadows. War is coming, little master. Don't you have a duty to perform? Naruto sighed before glancing at the shadowed form of one of his father's servants. The pharaoh is being cared for, but your father worries. Bastet and Sekhmet are in agreement. Dark times are on the horizon. You cannot remain here, little master. Stepping from the shadows, the servant struck a menacing image. Black ears flicked back and forth, and a delicately formed muzzle scented the air, bearing sharp white teeth at the scent of death that lingered on the breeze. Bangles of gold and precious stones jangled as it crossed arms over a thickly muscled chest. Naruto approached the being and laid a small hand on the massive shoulder. My duty is here. I cannot leave until I have fulfilled my promise. The jackal released a deep breath, and reached into a pouch at his hip and handed Naruto an intricately carved battle horn, the symbol of his father carved deeply into the bone. Sound this horn and your father will send an army to your aid. Thank you, Ajib. Naruto smiled at the captain of his father's guard. Take care, little master. Claw-tipped fingers ruffled the blonde locks before the jackal stepped once more into the shadows and vanished from sight. I will, Naruto whispered to empty garden. He couldn't fail, he wouldn't fail. The night air was balmy, but Itachi felt a chill that radiated from deep within his core. Airing at the lifeless body of his father brought back feelings that he would have rather kept buried. He would have rather found some peace in Naruto's company. Instead, here he stood, his brother shaking from the depth of his pain. Sasuke wasn't like him. Sasuke had been cherished. Itachi was the heir, Sasuke was the son. A dark part of himself had always hated his brother for that. That was the only thing that Itachi never allowed his brother to see: the burning jealousy, the anger at having been denied the same love that was showered on Sasuke. That particular emotion was pushed away the hardest. It wasn't his brother's fault that their father had a warped idea of what made a great pharaoh. Sasuke was one of the few things Itachi allowed himself to care about. Itachi, the priests will be here soon. Itachi really didn't want to speak. He didn't know what to say to his little brother. He didn't know how to provide the comfort that Sasuke so longed for. Even now, unbidden emotions were clawing at his sanity. They were crying to be released on the world. They were tearing gaping holes in the control that had been ingrained in his very being. Yet now, at this unwelcome moment, they were breaking through to the surface. What will happen now, Itachi? Asked Sasuke. He sounded like a lost little boy. It was so different from the arrogant prince of earlier. Itachi turned his obsidian-colored eyes on his brother. The priest will come and take him to the temple. You and I will make sure his tomb is ready for him. We only have 40 days, so we need to make haste. Itachi turned from the bedside and began to walk towards the golden doors. Sasuke's hand shot out and grasped the forearm of his brother. His eyes lifted pleadingly. Don't you feel anything, brother? Itachi's yes never faltered, though the words shook him to his core. No. Sasuke dropped his arm at the word. He would never know how difficult it was for Itachi to form that one little word. I do feel. I do hurt, screamed a part of his mind that was immediately smothered. Leaving his brother to stand watch over their father's corpse, Itachi walked to where the royal advisors were waiting. He fought down the feelings of disgust that rose in him at the knowledge of why they were gathered in this room like vultures waiting to peck away at his father's rotting corpse. It seems the vultures have ventured from their nests, commented Itachi wryly. Prince Itachi. The advisors all bowed in unison. They had this planned out. The greedy vultures. They assumed that things would be the same as with his father's reign. Fine, let them keep thinking that. It made things easier. The great Pharaoh Uchiha has begun his journey to Osiris, announced Itachi. It wasn't like the vultures didn't know that hour. 80 otherwise they would be in their luxurious homes instead of standing before him in the shadowed audience chamber. This announcement was more of a formality. Itachi was obligated as the firstborn son to announce the death before the advisors and vizier, had he not taken care of the little problem with the vizier. Even now his blood hummed with the delight he had felt as the weak-minded vizier's blood had spread across this very floor. His eyes lingered on the spot and in a moment of madness considered doing the same to the vultures standing before him. It would be so easy to simply rid himself of the annoying gaggle of self-important men. Though he was set to inherit the throne, the title of Pharaoh was also a political one. If the nobles and advisors raised a large enough petition, it could be given to one of his generals or to Sasuke. So, for now, he would play nice. It wasn't that he particularly desired the power of the title, but it was what he had been trained for. He had the strength to do what must be done, if need be. Sasuke didn't have the stomach to order the massacre of a village or watch the execution of children for their parents' crimes. Prince Itachi, we came to discuss your accession to the title of Pharaoh. Of course. Itachi leveled his emotionless eyes on the row of men standing before him. One of the advisors dropped his gaze while others began to fidget nervously in his presence. Good. The more they feared him, the less they would dispute his accession and the easier they would bend under his thumb. We have decided to support your birth claim to the throne, announced one of the advisors. The others nodded in accord. If any had doubts about his accession, they were wise to hold their tongues. I see. Itachi tilted his head as he observed the men. They were growing more and more nervous. Those expressionless eyes seemed to see through to each of their souls. Itachi was more demon than man in their eyes, and they did not want to be on the receiving end of his wrath. Brother. Itachi turned to see Sasuke standing in the doorway. His brother stood proud and tall, putting on a truly royal appearance for the advisors. Even Itachi could barely see the grief that was so well hidden. The high priest wishes to speak with you, said Sasuke. Itachi nodded and turned his attention once again to the quivering men before him. The coronation will be in 2 days. I would advise you to be prepared. 2 days. Prince Itachi, that is most irregular. There is much that needs to be prepared. All the nobles must be notified as they will want to attend. Stammered out one of the advisors. Then notify them that the coronation will be in 2 days if they so wish to attend, snarled the prince. The man backed down and bowed to Itachi's will. The nobles were likely to put up a fuss, though it was highly unlikely that anyone would dispute Itachi's right to the throne. He was a dangerous man on a good day. No one standing in this room wanted to see him truly angered. Seeing that no more objections were being raised, Itachi turned and walked towards his brother. There was much to be done and so little time in which to do it. Madara was sure to make his move very soon. The only thing that had stayed his hand in the past was his brother. Itachi never understood why Madara held back. Was it because of familial loyalty or did he fear the pharaoh? These were questions that only his uncle could answer. Familial loyalty to his nephews was another thing entirely. Ever since Pharaoh Uchiha's waning health became obvious, Madara began sending his idiot assassins after Itachi and Sasuke. Itachi was worried for Sasuke. The younger prince could defend himself, there was no doubt there. However, Itachi feared that Sasuke was too trusting of his servants and lovers. Madara could easily murder him through them. You did well, brother, to hide your sadness. Don't give those vultures anything to feed on, praised Itachi as he strode past his brother. A light appeared in Sasuke's eyes at the words. The praise of his brother meant more to him than gold. Such words were so scarcely given that Sasuke had learned to cherish them. The burden of his father's death felt lighter by his brother's presence. The raven-haired brothers returned to their father's rooms. Standing before the golden doors was High Priest Rami. His bald head shone in the lamplight. His robes were pristine white, lined with azure blue. The leopard pelt that adorned his chest was a symbol of his position in the temple of Anubis. Itachi knew that the robes had never been worn until this day. In honor of the pharaoh, Rami had dressed in new robes to attend the royal body. You honor my father with your presence. Itachi nodded towards the priest. Prince Itachi, Prince Sasuke. We shall take your father to the Ibu tent, which we have erected for him. The care of his vessel shall be our highest priority and honor, said Rami. Your care of our father is appreciated, said Sasuke. The priest turned to enter the room and oversee the removal of the body. Pausing, Rami turned his eyes to Itachi. Unlike the advisors, Rami kept his face neutral as his eyes locked with those of the prince. If I may, I would like to inquire to the welfare of Naruto. He was under my care at the temple. Itachi's eyes narrowed and zeroed in on the priest. He was asking about Bhisb Naruto. Walking towards the priest, Itachi moved with the grace of a wild cat. His eyes seemed to flash crimson in the lamplight. Rami fought back the urge to tremble in the presence of this man. Itachi radiated danger more than any other creature he'd ever met. He instantly regretted the question, for it appeared that Prince Itachi was very protective of the boy. Protective or possessive? As the thought that spun through Rami's mind. Naruto is none of your concern, old man, purred Itachi. I'm simply concerned for his well-being. His father left him in my care. Rami felt a trickle of sweat work its way down his spine. He could almost taste his death on the wings of the dark, yet beautiful creature before him. Prince Itachi seemed almost otherworldly as he stood before Rami. His dark hair fell over broad shoulders in rivers of midnight silk. Eyes, so black that the coal lining them gave them an even more depth, remained unblinking as they seemed to stare into Rami's very being. His entire body was posed as if to strike at any moment, muscles frozen in anxiousness. Rami refused to give in to the fear. Even if Prince Itachi took his life, he was not afraid for his soul. It would find refuge in the fields of Hetep and Iru. Do what you will, thought Rami. Do what you need to do and leave anything that concerns Naruto to me. Be grateful that I am lenient with you on this day, snarled Itachi before turning to his brother. I leave this to you. Itachi, where are you going? Sasuke looked near panicked at his brother's words. He knew Itachi and he also knew that Ida Kai was known for not caring whether he was in danger or not. Now that their father was gone, word would spread fast and soon more assassins would be sent. Itachi was only one man. Out. Don't worry, little brother. I'll take a few guards with me. With those words, Itachi was gone. Rami visibly slumped against the door. His legs felt weak and his heart beat so rapidly that he was afraid he would collapse from the strain. Prince Sasuke looked shaken as well, but for obviously different reasons. I leave you to your duties, High Priest. Please care for my father, murmured Sasuke before leaving. The visibly shaken man to compose himself alone. Itachi exited the palace, trailed faithfully by his two guards. In his opinion, this really wasn't necessary, but to soothe Sasuke's worries, he would allow the two to tag along. His hand caressed the pommel of the intricately decorated scimitar at his waist. He was a master with both sword and dagger. His throwing abilities were rivaled only by his skill with a sword. My prince, you should not be about at night. The shadows can hide villains. The guards were not pleased at being dragged from their beds to accompany the Dark Prince. Silence your tongues. You will draw attention to us if you continue to speak, snarled Itachi. He just needed to get out. Away from the smell of his father's death. Away from the unbidden thoughts and emotions that were beginning to plague him. Away from the sad eyes of his little brother. The desert air teased his skin like a lover. She was a fickle mistress, untamable and unattainable, and yet all longed to control her. A shuffling of clothing halted his progress along the abandoned street. Itachi's body subtly tensed. He could hear them moving in the shadows. He could smell the excitement that bled their pores to scent the air with their arrogant thoughts of grandeur. It disgusted him, as if he would fall to such lowly vermin as hired assassins. You think that I don't hear you scurrying around like the vermin that you are, announced Itachi loudly, as he drew his dagger from his belt. No sooner had the words left his mouth, Itachi let fly the dagger with deadly precision. A scream from the shadows broke the silence, followed by the thud of a lifeless body. That scream was the red flag that dropped, sending 3 more men from the shadows. Each of the men was dressed in the dull and dusty robes of the desert dwellers. Probably mercenaries hired by Madara to attempt, once again, to bring about the death of Itachi and Sasuke. It really was getting old and so predictable. Drawing his scimitar from its sheath, Itachi parried the attack of one of the marauders while his guards took on the other 2. The attacks came fast and with surprising accuracy from the heathen desert man. Kai narrowed his eyes and carefully followed the movements of his opponent. Smooth like a snake, the assassin attacked with a grace that far outweighed his appearance. This was no ordinary mercenary. This man was a trained assassin. Blocking yet another lightning-fast swing, Itachi continued to gauge his opponent's moves. Itachi was never one to jump into a fight blindly. He knew that to underestimate this opponent could cost him his life. After several minutes of being pushed back by the powerful swings of the assassin, Itachi noticed it. There was a flaw with his opponent. Though his blows were as accurate as they were powerful, his opponent lacked the stamina of a true warrior. He was tiring fast in his attempt to completely overpower Itachi. The swings were coming much slower than originally, and with less force. The man didn't even realize that he was already dead. Never losing his mask of indifference, though his soul sang out with excitement, Itachi began to turn the tables on the would-be assassin. "You lose," heard Itachi. Lunging quickly to the right, Itachi brought his scimitar up and felt the flesh rend and tear as it slid slickly into the abdomen of the assassin. Shock passed across the dying man's eyes. Crumpling to the ground, clutching desperately at his abdomen, the assassin began to shiver as his blood poured from his body, darkening the sand beneath him. Aki watched dispassionately as the man began to gurgle, blood gushing up and out of his mouth to stain pale skin crimson. He felt no pity for the man. He'd made his choice by accepting Madara's offer and in doing so, signed his own death warrant. The man continued to gurgle, choking on his own blood. The plea was garbled and nearly inaudible. Itachi heard it, even through the sounds of blades clashing as his guards continued to fight the remaining two assassins. He understood the request. He understood that the man was not asking to live but to die. Narrowing his eyes, Itachi knelt beside the man that had once posed a threat. Now, he lay before him in a puddle of his own blood and piss, asking for pity. Itachi was torn. Part of him wanted to make the man's last moments of life as painful as possible. Another part, however, wanted to end this man's suffering and leave him to whatever god he prayed to. "He will come and bring the armies of the south," garbled the assassin. "Perhaps, but should he cross my border, I will bring upon him a fate worse than 1,000 deaths. You are lucky. Your suffering ends now." With those words, Itachi sliced his scimitar cleanly through the flesh of the assassin's neck, severing the head from the body. Blood gushed in a macabre fashion before the slowing to an ooze. Looking down at his body, Itachi was presented a gruesome sight. His once pristine white kilt was now spattered with blood. His skin was slicked with blood and sweat. The smell of blood, urine, sweat, and death was pungent in the air. It was a smell that should have had him gagging. Instead, his mind rejoiced in the victory over his enemy. "Prince Itachi, are you well?" panted one of the guards from where he was slumped against a wall, clutching a bleeding arm. "Yes, though, it appears that you too are a little worse for the wear," answered Itachi as he pulled his dagger from the throat of the poor fool that had died before he did anything more than dream of the purse Itachi's death would draw. "Just minor wounds," piped in the second guard who fared a bit better than his compatriot. Itachi didn't wait for them to rest. His feet took him determinedly towards the palace and a much-needed bath. "How can he kill without feeling anything?" whispered one guard to the other. "He's not human." It was the only answer that his partner could give. Even now, they were still shaken after the experience, but Itachi carried on as if nothing untoward happened. It wasn't right, was the thought that spun through both minds before they trudged reluctantly after their prince. In his room, Naruto began to pace. He really didn't like being locked up for so long. He was used to open spaces, but Itachi had it in his head that Naruto needed to be kept like a pet. Growling low, Naruto popped the bones in his neck as his pacing became more erratic. "Master Naruto," whispered Intef. "What?" snarled Naruto, instantly regretting it as a hurt look crossed the poor servant's face. "I only thought Master Naruto might like to go to the baths." "They are most wonderful, and as long as the guards accompany you, I believe that Prince Itachi will have no qualms with it," whispered Intef. Naruto smiled brightly at the thought of a full bath. Since arriving in this world, he'd only been able to wash with a pitcher of water and a cloth. To be able to fully submerge himself in what Sounded like the most wonderful thing in the world to Naruto. Yes, I would like that very much. You are very smart to have thought of it, Intef, grinned Naruto happily. Intef returned the happy smile, pleased to have made his master so happy. Intef led Naruto, followed by the door guards, to the large bath. The room was massive. The high ceiling was decorated in beautiful tile work depicting various scenes of Nile life. The room smelled wonderfully of the soaps and oils used to clean the body. Several servants stepped forward and stripped Naruto of his kilt and belt. Leading the blonde to a small pool, the servants began to dip water from the pool and poured it over Naruto's body and head. With trained hands, the servants began to scrub away the dirt and sweat from his body in a somewhat ritualistic pattern. Naruto nearly moaned in pleasure as firm hands kneaded the tense muscles in his shoulders and lower back. More water was poured over him to rinse the soup from his skin. His body was limp and putty in the hands of the bath attendants. After several more minutes of being pampered by the attendants, Naruto was led to another room and a deeper pool, filled with clean Nile water. Enhanced with the addition of natron to give it purifying and skin-softening qualities. Naruto sank limply onto the smooth carved stone bench and nearly submersed his entire body beneath the cool, fragrant water. He vaguely heard a bit of commotion in the cleaning room but was too relaxed to even care. This was the most at ease he'd felt since leaving the fields. Nothing could destroy this feeling of peace. Itachi closed his eyes and bore the touches of the bathing attendants. They were skilled, there was no denying, but he disliked the touch of most individuals and suffered through the cleaning. On most days he would clean himself, but the amount of blood and grime that coated his body required assistance. He refused to dirty the pool with the blood of the assassin. The servants mad, quick work of cleaning his body as if they despised touching him as much as he disliked their touches. They would never voice such thoughts. To do so could cost them their lives. Having had enough of their touch, Itachi shrugged off the hands and motioned for them to rinse him so he could make his way to the pool. The soothing waters of the pool called to him. Shivering slightly as the cool desert breeze chilled his wet skin, Itachi made his way through the doorway and into the main room. As soon as he entered the room he froze. Lying with his head propped on the rim of the pool was his pet. That blonde hair was unmistakable even dampened from the bath. Water clung to the long neck and Itachi never thought himself to be jealous of water but in that moment he was. He wanted to be one of Ho's tiny droplets clinging so beautifully to the slender neck. Watching lustfully, Itachi followed the trail of one bead as it raced down Naruto's neck to disappear in the water. Glancing at his pet's face, Itachi was surprised to see his features completely smoothed in relaxation. He looked as if he had not a care in the world. If Itachi had thought him beautiful in his sleep, he was doubly entranced now. The water lapped delicately at Naruto's collarbone as Itachi slid silently into the cool water of the pool. Naruto's eyes popped open as the motion of the water alerted him to the presence of another. Eyes widened in shock at the sight of Prince Itachi standing waist-deep in the water. The black eyes followed every move that Naruto made. Naruto knew he was the prey but as much as his mind screamed reasons for him to run away. His body wanted to be owned completely by this dark creature before him. Naruto. Heard Itachi, his tongue tasting each syllable in the name. How is it that every time I go somewhere, you find me? Naruto knew that the fates must be either working with him or against him when it concerned Itachi. The man almost had a sixth sense when it came to him. The corner of Itachi's lips quirked at the question. It seemed as if Naruto was a bit flustered at having been found bathing. Itachi, on the other hand, could not have been more pleased at the presence of his little pet in the bath. Naruto swallowed but stood his ground as Itachi approached. The water swirled around the two of them in small waves at Itachi's approach. Itachi's breath on Naruto's neck caused the blonde to jerk. The small puffs of breath sent uncontrollable shivers across his skin, raising chill bumps. Itachi breathed in deep the smell of the fragrant soaps combined with Naruto's own natural scent. If he'd known it would be this alluring, he would have sent him to the baths long before now. You smell delicious. Heard Itachi as he drew his tongue up the line of smooth skin. You taste as good as you smell. Naruto fought to prevent his eyes from rolling back in his skull. It felt so good. The touch of warm tongue and the press of the hard body felt unlike anything he'd experienced before. He had to stop it before he lost all ability to think. Stop. The words were barely as loud as a breath. Itachi pulled back and stared deeply into Naruto's eyes. Why should I stop, when it's obvious that your body doesn't want me to? Itachi lowered his hand, nails scraping along the sensitive skin of Naruto's abdomen. Naruto closed his eyes at the sensation of a rough palm stroking the smooth skin. Tell me. The words were spoken so very close to Naruto's ear that there was no way he could have missed them. Because, you don't own me yet, panted Naruto, his hands clawing at Itachi's shoulders in an attempt to ground himself. Itachi released his grip on him and stepped back, barely contained anger flared dangerously behind obsidian eyes. I own every piece of you. No, my heart and my soul are still my own. Naruto blinked his eyes at the flash of hurt that appeared in the black eyes before it was replaced once again by anger. Itachi grabbed Naruto, slamming him hard against the edge of the pool. The harsh edges scraped and cut his shoulders. He watched as the faintest shade of pink tinted the water before becoming too diluted to see. Why do you keep defying me? What do you hope to gain by forcing my hand? Growled Itachi. Naruto reached up and ran his fingers over the dangerously beautiful eyes, tracing the heavy lines of weariness before ending at his lips. You aren't ready to know. 2 days. Snarled Itachi. The night of the coronation, you will be in my bed. Is that a threat? No, it's a promise. With those words, Itachi released Naruto and pulled himself from the pool. Naruto couldn't draw his eyes away from the way the powerful muscles played along his back before tapering into a tight waist and firm buttocks. For a warrior prince, Hai's skin was surprisingly unmarked by scars or burns. Wrapping a length of linen around his waist, Itachi turned his eyes to Naruto once again. 2 days. Naruto wrapped his arms around himself. His body berated him at the state it was left in. His body throbbed and his back ached as he felt the skin knitting itself back together. In moments, the painful lacerations would be gone, leaving only dark bruises that would fade in a few hours. I should have handled that better, murmured Naruto, as he pulled himself from the water. As he dressed, Naruto couldn't push away the memory of the hurt that had flashed in Itachi's eyes. That one vision haunted him more than any other thought. He wouldn't have thought the words would have had such a profound effect on the man, and yet he'd seen it with his own eyes. Itachi may have hidden it with anger, but that didn't erase the fact that it was there in plain sight. Naruto closed his eyes. He wasn't lost. For a moment, Naruto had feared that there was nothing left to salvage, and yet he'd seen the evidence of life behind those angry eyes. That was the only reassurance Naruto needed. He knew he couldn't fail because a living heart was on the line. Naruto shivered as the cool desert air teased his damp skin. The bath servants had fought with each other to be the one to rub oils on his skin, but Naruto flashed a bright smile and opted to forego a massage and simply retire to his quarters for the night. The pouts that graced the faces of the bathers made him smile. They certainly were enthusiastic about their job. Master, do you require anything else before I retire? Asked Intef. No, I'm fine. Thank you for showing me the baths. It was my pleasure, Master Naruto. The boy bowed low to his master before exiting the room to seek his own bed. Naruto shrugged the robe from his shoulders and walked naked to the dais. Slipping between the cool linen sheets, Naruto reclined back and watched the flame of the lamp flicker back and forth in a seductive dance. Naruto's body still thrummed from Itachi's touch. His body longed to be filled by the Dark Prince. Never in his imagination had he expected to have such a potent reaction to the man that was his mission. It was both exciting and frustrating. To become involved with the prince was dangerous, and it put more than Itachi's heart on the line. He wanted to say that his body's reaction to Itachi was an unacceptable response, but he couldn't bear to. He longed for the touches and kisses. In just a short while, he had become a slave to the man's touch. In truth, he had nearly become the pet Itachi called him. Seeking his owner's touch like one of the palace cats. Tossing yet again, Naruto struggled to find sleep that would not come. His body ached, but his heart pained him all the more. In 2 days, Itachi would fulfill the promise he made in the bath. Should he resist, his mission could become compromised. Should Naruto bow to the prince's and his own desires, he might be the one paying the price. Already, he found himself drawn even more to Itachi. Naruto feared what would happen when Itachi took his body. He had always imagined that his first time would be with someone that loved and cherished him. Was he willing to use his body to accomplish his mission? Would his heart survive the loss of Itachi if he did? His mind spun with the possibilities, exhausting itself with what could happen. Gradually, the weariness of the day began to take its toll on the blonde and he drifted into a restless sleep. His dreams were haunted by midnight eyes, sinful kisses, and heated touches. The occupant in the adjoining set of rooms was not having an easy time sleeping either. Itachi's tired eyes scanned the room before stopping to watch the play of shadows on the walls. His body was heavy with exhaustion, but his mind churned with the events of the day. In just one day, his locked-down emotions had been beating at their prison, seeking escape into the word. It had been years since he'd had such a difficult time reigning in himself. Everything seemed to lead back to the blonde. Who was Naruto? Where lust had reigned supreme, now curiosity ruled his thoughts. Unlike the rest of the priests, Naruto's head was unshaven. Priests of Anubis were always clean-shaven. Why not Naruto? Was he a member of the temple or something else? The high priest acted as if he was more than just a low-ranking priest. Why would the head of the order have such affection and concern for the little blonde? There was also his unusual hair. It wasn't dyed with henna or any other color. It reminded him of the tales of the barbarians that resided in the Arctic realms far to the north. Growling in his throat at the thought of Naruto taking up so much of his thoughts, Itachi turned onto his stomach and buried his face in the fragrant linen. What was it about the blonde that created turmoil while at the same time soothing him? Even Sasuke seemed drawn to the blonde, and that annoyed Itachi even more. He feared what he would do should Sasuke ever fancy taking Naruto from him. Closing his eyes, Itachi felt exhaustion tug at him. It pulled at his consciousness so strongly that he had no choice but to give in to the call. Instead of blood and death, his dreams were haunted by sapphire eyes and warm, tan skin. Itachi. The words were whispered in his ear, but he ignored them. His body felt heavy and his mind was foggy. All he wanted was to be able to drift back into the deep recuperative slumber that called to him like a siren. Itachi. The words this time were harsher, effectively pulling him from sleep and into wakefulness. Sasuke, there had better be an extremely good reason why you have disturbed me. The words held barely contained malice. Sasuke flinched but didn't back down. Madara is here. Itachi jerked fully awake, lunged from the bed and walked naked across the room towards one of his clothing chests. Pulling a pleated kilt from the ornate chest, Itachi wrapped the in-woven linen around his waist and secured it with a golden belt. Pulling a gold chain from which a golden lapis lazuli inlaid eye of Horus hung to fall just over his sternum. The gold sparkled in the sunlight. As the only adornment, it drew attention and declared his position as the heir to the kingdom. A knock at the door was answered by Sasuke. A servant bowed and entered carrying small box. Itachi sat in a nearby chair and closed his eyes. The servant opened the box and began to line the prince's eyes with the blackened cosmetic. The lines of his eyes were extended past the corner as a symbol of eternity. The black lines stood stark against Itachi's naturally pale skin, framing his obsidian eyes perfectly. Picking a brush from the mirrored table, the servant brushed the long thick hair and tied it with an ornate brooch. Finishing his duties, the servant bowed and exited the room, leaving the two princes alone once more. Sasuke's eyes were shadowed and he looked more like his brother than ever before. The pain of the loss of their father coupled with lack of sleep and now the appearance of their traitorous uncle facilitated a change in the younger's eyes. Itachi narrowed his own eyes at the black aura that surrounded his brother in a dark embrace. This was not what he wanted for his brother. He wanted Sasuke to remain untouched by the darkness that lived so deep in his soul. Sasuke was not meant to be a part of this. Where is he? If Madara had come to kill him, Itachi would be sure to send him the afterlife with all the warmth that he had shown them. He is in the receiving chamber. Sasuke scowled as the words left his lips. Repeat that. Itachi wasn't sure he'd heard his brother correctly. He's here in the receiving chamber. Brother, we should kill him and be done with it. He will murder us and take the throne for himself. To hear Sasuke suggest murdering the uncle shocked Itachi immediately into action. Sasuke, go to Naruto's chamber and wait for me. If I find out that you left that room I will be extremely displeased. No, I'm going with you. He's made attempts on my life as well. You will go to Naruto's chamber. If Madara tries something, I don't trust the guards to keep him safe. Itachi wasn't stupid. He knew that Madara had spies in the palace. He also knew that his uncle would use any trick in his arsenal against them. Why do you care so much about him? He's easily replaced. Sasuke crossed his arms and glared at his brother. Just do it, Sasuke. You are the only one I trust. TCH, fine. Sasuke stomped from the room, closing the door with a slam. Itachi winced internally at Sasuke's childish performance. Madara was not to be underestimated. If Madara knew of Itachi's infatuation with the young blonde, there was no doubt in his mind that his uncle would use that to his advantage. Clasping golden bangles around his wrists and tying a golden dagger to his waist, Itachi exited the room and walked calmly towards the receiving chamber. His eyes remained forward and his aura radiated deadly calm as he approached the massive double doors leading to the where he would meet eyes with the man who was tied to him by blood. 2. Nubians opened the doors and Itachi strode into the room. His eyes were careful to take note of every person within the walls. Several advisors, the royal guard, and standing before the royal dais was his uncle Madara. Itachi's insides chilled as he stared into the crimson eyes of his father's brother. For long moments, they faced each other, sizing up strengths and searching for weakness. Madara was the first to speak. His deep voice echoed on the walls. Nephew. Madara bowed his head in acknowledgement. Madara, why do you show your face before me? Do you seek to challenge me for the right to lead my country? Quite the contrary. I am here merely to mourn the loss of my brother. The cultured tone added a hint of condescending to what would normally be words spoken in grief. Itachi was off the dais and in front of Madara with the golden dagger pressed dangerously close to jugular before anyone could deter him. The older man didn't flinch as the blade bit into his skin. Both men stared deeply into the other's eyes. Itachi's black flashed dangerously as he pressed the blade even firmer against the warm flesh, watching as a bead of blood trickled down to pool at the base of Madara's neck. Prince Itachi, cried out the advisors, but one glance at them silenced their cries. I should kill you now and save myself the trouble of having to do the job later, hissed Itachi into Madara's ear. But you won't, will you? You, who are cultivated by my brother to be prepared to use any means to your ends, will do nothing in order to keep those simpering nobles out of your business. Madara smirked and sent a telling stare towards where the royal advisors stood watching the affair with barely veiled fear. Itachi pressed harder, feeling the blade press millimeters deeper, the CNGLE bead of blood turning into a small trickle. His jaw clenched as he continued to stare into the crimson orbs of his uncle. Why are you here to mourn my brother? The same words were spoken, and Itachi watched as the laughing eyes turned dark with malice. Itachi's hand tightened on the blade. You would kill me, the brother of your newly deceased father. What message would that send to your loving subjects? I stand before you unarmed and yet you attack me unprovoked. Itachi suppressed the urge to growl at the smug words. The man was playing with him. In honor of my father, I will spare you life just this once. You will be escorted from my lands. I warn you, uncle, if you dare step foot in this land again, I will destroy you. With those words, Itachi turned and left the room. Madara watched his nephew leave the receiving chamber with a smirk. You think that you will destroy me, but it will be I who will drive you over the brink and into insanity before I destroy you. Madara smiled darkly to himself before he was escorted away by the guards. Lord Madara, gasped a young woman as she ran up to begin keeping pace with his long steps. What have you learned, Nephra? Madara asked without slowing his pace or losing a step. Prince Itachi keeps a pet, a young slave with unique coloring. The servant spoke of how Itachi watches the boy and how he is extremely possessive of him. Nephra whispered the words while eyeing the guards that trailed several feet behind them. Madara didn't appear concerned at all with their presence. Interesting. Perhaps my nephew has a weakness after all. Very good, Nephra. Thank you, Lord Madara, simpered Nephra. Madara smiled. Yes, very good indeed. X tilde 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 X tilde. Itachi left the receiving room before he lost all control and killed the man. It was one thing to kill a man found guilty of treason, it was another to kill a man with no proof of traitorous acts. It was especially difficult when that man was the dead Pharaoh's brother. Madara took a great chance by coming before Itachi. Pushing open the door, he entered Naruto's room. Glancing at the bed, he noticed the blonde was still sleeping. Naruto's toned chest rose and fell in a natural rhythm. A cough from the corner of the room forced Itachi to tear his eyes from the blonde. Did you kill him? I don't believe this is something that should be discussed here. What, you think he will hear anything? The idiot sleeps like a rock. He hasn't so much as moved since I've been here. Sasuke gestured to where Naruto lay softly snoring. We will talk about this later, Sasuke. Itachi felt his eyes drawn once again to the dais. You let him go. You stupid bastard. You had him in your hands and you let him go. Sasuke's voice rose with each word. His distress and anger at this revelation was evident in the rising timbre of his voice. Be quiet. I said we will talk about this later. Madara is smart. He knows we have no proof that he sent the assassins. I had no choice. Until the coronation, my position is not secure. I have to be very careful, explained Itachi. So you just let him walk away to do whatever he pleases. I had no choice. I lost control and the presence of the advisors and guard. I don't have the power of the Pharaoh. Not yet, and if he sends more assassins, we will take care of them as we always have. You and I are not easy to kill. What of Naruto? It's not hard to notice that you are possessive of him. People will talk, and if Madara strikes at you through Naruto, will you be able to live with the consequences of today? If I'd been an assassin, the idiot would have long since been dead. Itachi's eyes hardened to gleaming obsidian at Sasuke's words. Growling low in his throat, Itachi glanced back at Naruto. This is going to come back to haunt you, Itachi, warned Sasuke before giving Itachi a withering look and exiting the room. Turning his attention to where the blonde slept on, unaware of the heated words spoken, Itachi wondered at the late rise of Naruto. Perhaps Naruto's sleep had been just as slow in coming as his own. He continued to watch as Naruto's nose scrunched up and curled into a tight ball, nuzzling the soft linen sheets that had become tangled around his nude body during what looked to be a long night of tossing and turning. Walking to the bed, Itachi stroked a hand down the sleep-warm skin of Naruto's arm. The blonde giggled and shrugged away from the touch. Itachi's lips quirked upward at the endearing sight. Stop. Tickles, mumbled Naruto before dropping back to sleep. I won't let anyone take you from me. You say I don't own your heart and soul. I'll take them by force, then. I will own every part of you. Itachi traced the whiskers on Naruto's face, before silently leaving the room. Naruto's eyes blinked sleepily as he sat up, struggling to untangle his limbs from the twisted linen. He could have sworn someone was in the room. Rubbing the last traces of sleep from his eyes, he rolled from the sleeping dais and padded across the floor to the table that was laden with the fresh fruit and breads that Intef had placed there before he woke. Perhaps it was Intef that he'd felt, shaking the feelings of uncertainty. Naruto finished his meal and pulled a clean kilt from the chest. His body was clean from the bath the night before, and Naruto felt ready to begin his day. Tying the supple leather belt around his waist, Naruto walked to the doors of his bedroom, pausing before exiting. Would he be able to leave the room? Feeling a bit of claustrophobia being trapped in this room, spacious though it was, Naruto decided that if the guards refused to let him through, then he would sneak out. Poking his head through the doors, Naruto noticed the same guards as before. They continued to keep their eyes trained forward. They were as still as statues, and yet they knew every move that Naruto made. Hey, can I leave? The guards said nothing and continued stare ahead. Naruto pouted and crossed his arms across his tan chest. Can't you answer a simple question? Can I leave the room? They're mutes, you idiot. Naruto swung around to see Sasuke standing in the shadows, looking at him as if he was stupid. What makes him think he's so smart? Naruto pouted to himself. Well, how was I supposed to know? They can't tell me. Sasuke blinked a few times at pouting blonde. One of the guards released something that sounded suspiciously like a laugh, earning a death glare from Sasuke. The guard remained facing forward, but a faint smile curved the harsh line of his lips. What are you doing here? Naruto looked over the youngest prince cautiously. I live in the palace. I have a right to be everywhere. The only rooms forbidden to me without invitation are my father's and Itachi's. Yes, but that doesn't say why you are outside my room. Perhaps I was going to offer to show you the large palace gardens. However, if you are going to be annoying, I think I will just go find something else to do. Sasuke shrugged and walked down the hall. Wait, Naruto lunged for the prince, clutching at his arm in desperation. The chance to go outside, dangled before him, was too much to resist. It seemed like forever since he'd had the chance to bask outside. The small garden adjoining his room, while pleasant, wasn't large enough to stave off the feelings of claustrophobia that had begun choking his spirit. Don't touch me, snarled Sasuke, pulling his arm from the clinging grasp of Naruto. Naruto jerked back as if slapped. His eyes blinked in confusion and not a small amount of hurt. The dark-haired prince sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Itachi had him nervous about even being around the blonde. He didn't even want to think what Itachi would do if he saw Naruto clinging to him. Brother or not, he was a dead man if Itachi even thought for a moment that Sasuke was interested in Naruto. Just don't cling to me. Itachi wouldn't like it. Huh, don't be an idiot. Itachi would kill me in an instant if he thought that I wanted to take you from him. He doesn't own me. Keep telling yourself that if it makes you feel better. I can tell you that he prizes you above all else. I wouldn't be surprised if he was willing to die for you. The gods only know what he sees in you. It's so unlike my brother to care about anything. Sasuke led Naruto down a series of halls, the door guards trailing faithfully behind. It's not such a bad thing to treasure others. Naruto smiled. Itachi isn't other people. Listen and listen well. Something inside Itachi is ruined, not broken, ruined. You can't fix him, if that's what you were planning. He's dangerous. I've warned you before, but for some reason I like you, so I'll say it again. Don't cross him. Sasuke watched as Naruto's face became determined. His blue eyes darkened and took on a gleam. It was almost as if he was preparing himself to accept a challenge. He's not ruined, Sasuke. I love him. He is my brother, but he doesn't feel things the way that we do. Just be careful, Naruto. Sasuke's eyes became shadowed and he said no more the rest of the walk. A large gate marked the end of their journey. Pushing through, Sasuke led Naruto into a massive series of gardens. Fragrant flowers lined marble walkways. Several benches dotted the landscape. This garden dwarfed the one beside his room by at least 10 times. It's massive. Naruto stood in awe of the view. So I've been told, muttered Sasuke to himself. Naruto snorted at the comment. So the younger brother had a sense of humor. Ndered if he could pull one from Itachi as well. A few cats, lazing about in the sun, jumped up and began to curl themselves around Naruto's legs, seeking his attention. Naruto crouched down and began to caress the soft fur, savoring the happy purrs that radiated from the small chests. Closing his eyes, Naruto soaked up the mid-morning sun. The rays warmed his skin and gave him hope for his mission. Breathing deeply of the floral-scented air, Naruto left Sasuke standing at the gate to walk through the garden. The flowers danced in the light breeze, releasing their fragrance through the garden. In a land soon to be ravaged by war, taking a moment of peace was welcome. Naruto laughed happily. He'd never gotten used to being indoors. He preferred to spend his time out in the open. Perhaps it was some of the animalistic blood from his father, or perhaps it was the fact that his mother was the goddess of the sky. How can you be so happy? Naruto turned to see Sasuke standing beneath the shade of a large tree. This day is a blessing of Nut. You should rejoice in its beauty. Naruto approached the younger prince. Sasuke said nothing but turned away to stare blankly into the garden. I see. You mourn for your father. Sasuke swung to face the blonde at the words. What do you know? Sasuke snarled out the words, bitterness and loss tainting the words with their malice. Your father will have been escorted safely to Osiris by now. Your father's heart will balance. You shouldn't grieve his loss but instead wait patiently until you join him in the fields. The priests all spoke similar words. Your father will pass into the fields. We will include all the appropriate charms and spells. All this was told to Sasuke, and yet only with the words coming from Naruto's lips did his soul find peace. Naruto's words rang truer than any priest. Sasuke smiled, not a smirk, but a smile. His heart lifted and his soul felt lighter. Thank you, Naruto. Grabbing Sasuke before he could pull away, Naruto pulled the prince to the large fountain located near the center of the garden. Look at this, Sasuke. Scooping up the clear water in cupped hands, Naruto offered his hands to the dark-haired prince. Sasuke leaned over to look into the hands when he suddenly got a face full of water. Rearing back and wiping wildly at his face, Sasuke turned an incredulous face towards Naruto. The blonde burst into laughter, pointing a finger towards Sasuke's face. Sasuke reached up and wiped his cheek with a finger. Pulling it back, he found it covered in black coal. The water from the fountain had oused the thickly applied coal around his eyes to run down his cheeks. You look like a drowned raccoon, gasped Naruto between bursts of laughter. You little shit, snarled Sasuke before lunging after the blonde. Naruto wasn't a fool and didn't stay still long enough for Sasuke to catch him. Running quickly along the path, Naruto looked behind him to see how far ahead he was when he ran into a hard chest. Glancing up quickly, Naruto saw Itachi's confused gaze before hearing Sasuke round the corner yelling obscenities in Naruto's general direction. You little shit, I'll tan your hide for doing something like that, Itachi. What's going on here, Sasuke? Itachi's voice was dark and smooth. Naruto felt himself falling under its spell. Look what that little idiot did to me. Itachi looked at the running coal. He blinked a few times before the corner of his lip turned upwards in the beginning of a smile before being hidden once more, but not quick enough for Naruto to miss it. I'm sure Naruto is properly contrite after being chased by such an interesting-looking face. Aren't you, pet? Sasuke blinked at his brother a few times before scowling and stomping out of the garden. I hope he's not too mad. I was only playing. Sasuke might not show it, but I think he was enjoying your little game. I suspect he was more upset at having me put an end to it, commented Itachi as he watched his brother disappear from sight. I have a present for you, pet. Itachi lifted a hand and brushed his fingers along Naruto's smooth neck. The breath stilled in Naruto's throat. I'm not your pet. Itachi didn't comment. Unwrapping the parcel, he removed an intricately carved golden collar, inlaid with sapphires of the highest quality. Naruto's eyes widened at the masterful craftsmanship of the collar before scowling at what the object was for. You are not putting that on me, shouted Naruto as he turned to run. Itachi was having none of that. Grabbing the blonde with a firm hand, the prince clasped the gold around Naruto's neck, careful to avoid pinching the skin with the metal clasp. Stepping back to admire his pet, Itachi smirked at the defiant look Naruto sent his way. I will be he only one to take this collar off of you. I want to show you off at the coronation tomorrow. Everyone will look at you and know you belong to me. Itachi trailed his fingers around the edges of the collar before taking Naruto's chin between his fingers. Tomorrow, you will behave and I will reward you, smirked Itachi. Naruto's lower lip poked out at the words. Itachi felt his eyes drawn to the movement. Running his thumb across the moist protrusion, Itachi felt heat coursing through his body. His body cried out for him to just take the blonde and work him from his system. It cried out for tea. He released that the warmth of Naruto's body could give him. Prince Itachi, the advisors are calling for you. Closing his eyes, Itachi caressed the lip one last time before lowering his hand and turning from Naruto. Without a word, Itachi left the blonde standing in the garden feeling more confused than he ever had in his life. A few drops into the cup are more than enough to kill even the largest wild animal. The voice was muffled by a crimson scarf thrown haphazardly across the face, blocking any chance of identification. I'm not sure. I'll be executed for sure. The well-dressed servant's eyes darted back and forth in fear. He wanted to run and hide from the evil intent that dripped from the scarf-muffled voice. A cold that was creeping along his spine kept him locked in place as the eyes above the scarf darkened in malice. Lord Madara rewards those who serve him, as well as punishes those that hamper him. As the royal cup-bearer, it is you who have the final approval for all beverages that are presented to the pharaoh and his favorites. It is you who tastes the wines of the royal family for poison. It is you and you alone who can accomplish this. If you fail us, there is no hole that you can hide. No god that can protect you from us. You promise to protect me if things should go awry. If you follow my instructions correctly and things go according to our plans, you will be richly rewarded. Tell me what I must do. X X X. The day of the coronation dawned beautiful. Naruto pouted as Intef tugged on the exquisitely woven kilt in order to arrange the pleats perfectly for the coronation. Naruto ran his fingers around the rim of the golden collar, his brow crinkling with annoyance. It wasn't locked and he could take it off at any point, but he found himself not wanting to. That annoyed him more than the ring of gold encircling his neck. He wanted it there. He wanted everyone who saw him to know who put it there. Master Naruto, you look beautiful. I feel like a dog being dressed up to be shown off by its master. Master Naruto, you aren't a dog. You were favored by the future Pharaoh. You have more power than nearly everyone in the palace. Only the Pharaoh, Prince Sasuke, and their advisors will have more than you. Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep, calming breath. Warm air filled his lungs as he inhaled, and then slowly exhaled. This was not what he was expecting when he'd told his father he would save Itachi's heart. Yet he found himself not looking forward to returning home. He found himself becoming attached to the humans he interacted with. Even the silent guards that stood as statues outside his door. Now all that remains are your eyes. Naruto sat patiently on the stool as Intef painted his eyes with kohl. The thick black cosmetic illuminated his eyes, bringing alive the stunning azure color. Sighing deeply, Naruto stood and turned to face the looking glass that Intef brought before him. Here Naruto stood, the oiled and painted pet of the soon-to-be pharaoh. Peering into his reflecting image, Naruto was astonished at his appearance. His hair, wild as ever, held a somewhat organized look to it. His skin shone with a HEALTHY glow and his eyes jumped out from his face like blue jewels. Parting his lips, Naruto reached out and touched the smooth image as if unsure if what he was seeing was real. See, I told you that you looked beautiful, master. So you did, Intef. Are you ready to go to the front of the palace? They are beginning to gather for the ceremony. I suppose I have no choice. Intef led Naruto, followed by his ever-faithful guards, through the corridors until they found themselves standing before a large ornate throne. Intef gestured for Naruto to sit on the small cushion that was placed at the side. Naruto was sure a tic was forming in his brow. If the collar didn't pound home the fact that Itachi owned him, the pillow most definitely did. You can't be serious, muttered Naruto. Forgive me, Master Naruto. It was Lord Itachi's orders that you be placed here until he comes for you, whispered Intef. It is fine, Intef. Thank you, sighed Naruto before settling comfortably on the cushion, all the while cursing both Itachi and Sasuke for putting him in this situation. What a good little pet you are being today. Naruto turned and saw Sasuke smirking at him. The youth was dressed in a simple white kilt accompanied by a gold belt, gold gauntlets and a gold and lapis lazuli necklace. His eyes were outlined by kohl and Naruto couldn't help but snicker at the memory of a drenched Sasuke, chasing him with the cosmetic running down his face in black rivulets. Sasuke scowled at the grin on his face and Naruto knew that he was thinking of the exact same memory. Priceless. Sasuke was so damn easy to play. It was like taking sweets from a child. The sound of drums drew the attention of the entire room. The grand doors opened and Itachi walked into the large throne room dressed in full pharaoh regalia. His royal guard followed diligently behind him and stationed themselves close to Itachi, ready to deflect an attack on his life. Itachi stopped before the throne and hooked a thin golden chain into the collar. Naruto stiffened and jerked away as if burned. I'm not an animal, he hissed. Itachi smiled secretively and simply tugged on the chain. The chain was thin and he could have easily broken it, but preferring not to make a scene, he followed diligently behind Itachi, inwardly fuming. Oh, he was going to pay for this. Naruto wasn't sure how, but he was definitely going to paw. Why for leading him around on a chain like a dog? Naruto gazed up at the cloudless blue sky as they stepped from the palace and into the sun. The day was balmy but not uncomfortable. He was at once KFUL that he was dressed only in a kilt and his jewelry. The royal guard wasn't so lucky. Due to the occasion, they were dressed in full armor and weaponry. The heat was probably sweltering to them. Naruto felt a little bit of pity for them. Glancing towards Itachi, He saw sweat was also beading on his temple and forehead. Naruto bit his lip to withhold the snicker that wanted, ever so much, to escape. For Itachi, he felt not the smallest drop of pity. Let the asshole melt in all that clothing. The royal family, guard, and nobles arrived before the temple of Ptah. The head of the temple met them at the doorway into the temple. Bowing low before the future pharaoh, Itachi handed Naruto's chain to Sasuke and followed the priest into the temple. Following behind the high priest, Itachi's eyes wandered over the walls of the temple. It was always here that the pharaoh was coronated. If these priests acknowledged you as the leader of the people of the Nile, the world acknowledged you. The corridors grew dark, illuminated by only a few strategically placed oil lamps. The shadows crawled high on the stone walls almost as if they held a life of their own. The air became heavy with the scent of incense and oils. The hall opened into a large room. Priests lined the walls, each praying in a synchronized voice. Sweat gleamed on their skin and it was obvious that they had been praying for longer than simply upon his arrival at the temple. Lord Itachi, we will now perform the purification of your body. Two priests approach Itachi, one wearing the mask of Thoth while the other wore the mask of Horus. Priests removed his garments and he stood between Horus and Thoth wearing only a simple white kilt. He was stripped of his garments of royalty so that he stood before the priesthood as only a man. Dressed in simple clothing, the priests raised ankh-shaped vases above Itachi's head and the life-giving water of the Nile was poured over his body. The journey from the palace to the temple had been straining in the heat of the day. The cool feel of water soothed his heated body. 4 times the priests did this. In the eyes of the temple, Itachi was reborn from the mother Nile. Priests once again approached Itachi to dry and dress him. The high priest lifted from a pillow the ankh, symbol of life. Placing the ankh in Itachi's hands, the priest gazed on the young king with piercingly dark eyes. Itachi felt the touch of the gaze like a brand. He felt power beginning to take form in the room. The priest maintained the gaze, as if seeing deeply into Itachi. Itachi refused to lower his eyes. He would die before he lowered his eyes to anyone. Nodding in approval, the priest turned from him to where the crown of the kingdom lay on a large pillow. Taking the crown from the pillow and placing it on Itachi's head, the high priest presented him before the priesthood of Ptah. The priests began to chant with renewed vigor. We are satisfied with him in life and peace. He is thy son of thy form, thy vigorous seed. Thou gave him thy ba, thy power, thy influence, thy magic, thy crown, even when he was still in the body of her who bore him. The lowlands are his and the mountains belong to him. Everything which the heavens wrap round, everything which the sea encircles. Thou knew the future. Thou gave him the portion of Horus in life and the years of Seth in good fortune. We give him dominion over the lands in peace. We give him all life and good fortune on our part, all food on our part, all sustenance on our part. He is at the head of all living cause together. Are with his Ka as king of Upper and Lower Egypt on the throne of Horus like unto Re, forever and ever. The priesthood kneeled before Itachi, honoring him as the king. The new pharaoh strode from the cloistered room, followed by the priesthood. Pausing at the top of the steps, he watched as the nobles were now turning eyes to bear witness to his succession to the throne. Sasuke's eyes widened at sight of his brother wearing the garments of the pharaoh. Itachi presented a regal image that seemed almost untouchable. The power that radiated from him charged across each and every individual. His black eyes gazed out over the crowd, locking on where Sasuke stood with Naruto. Obsidian met azure and sparks seemed to flare from both eyes. Naruto inclined his head in acknowledgement of Itachi's succession. Sasuke, as well, was stunned into silence by the image of his brother. Itachi had always exuded a power that he could never hope to match. Wearing the garments of God on earth, he provided an even more powerful visage. Lowering his eyes, Sasuke was the first to bow before the darkly handsome king. The nobles, shaken from their frozen amazement, followed in suit until all but Naruto bowed before Itachi. Naruto's eyes remained locked with Itachi's for long minutes before he bowed his head in respect to the new ruler of the land of the Nile. Itachi marched down the large stone steps and took the thin gold chain from Sasuke's hand. With a small tug, Itachi pulled Naruto towards the front of the temple and turned to face his subjects. Though war may come to our land, I will protect you with all of my strength. The gods have deemed that I am the one that leads you, and so I shall. You need not fear tonight in your beds, for this land is safe until the star of Sirius shines brightest and my father's body is laid to rest." Quote. Those words being said, Itachi led the procession back to the palace where the servants and slaves had prepared a marvelous feast for the pharaoh and nobles. The tables were loaded with various delicacies. There was roasted waterfowl, seasoned with herbs and spices from the east. Fish caught in the Nile were baked in a bread crust, seasoned with garlic and fruit juices. A whole roast ox, accompanied by onions and garlic, was placed on a large table by straining slaves. Freshly baked breads and pastries littered the various tables. Bowls of grapes, dates, apricots, and pomegranates soon joined the feast. Lastly, the servants filled the cups of the feast-goers with beer, wine, or milk. Itachi took his place at the head of the feast with Naruto following reluctantly behind him. The choicest pieces of meat, fowl and fish were presented before Itachi in succession for his approval. With each nod, the dishes were placed on the table before him. Kai motioned for the cupbearer to bring the wine with a flick of his wrist. At the flick of his pharaoh's hand, the cupbearer swallowed the lump that formed in his throat and approached the table to hear Pharaoh Itachi's orders. "Bring me a cup of wine." The cupbearer bowed low and returned to the table holding the pharaoh's personal beverages. Taking a sip of the wine to uphold appearances, the cupbearer slipped the poison unnoticed into the flavorful wine. Placing the cup in front of Itachi, the quivering cupbearer slunk silently into the shadows and watched with shifty eyes the events that unfolded. Itachi ignored the wine and tearing off a bit of waterfowl, he offered the morsel to Naruto, who sat at his feet on a soft pillow. Naruto was tempted to bite off the fingers offering the foe. But his grumbling stomach refused to allow him to bite the hand that fed him. Maybe later, after his stomach was full, he would bite the man that treated him like an animal. He considered for a while how far he would allow Itachi to go. "Is it good, little pet?" A smirk formed on Itachi's lips as Naruto ignored the question completely, remaining silent. "Not speaking to me," purred Itachi. Naruto scowled, deciding that two could play at this game. When the fingers were lowered again, this time containing a bit of roasted oxen, Naruto gently took the bit of food in his mouth, sucking delicately at the fingers while his tongue curled around the digits until every bit of flavor was gone. Itachi's eyes were hooded as he stared deeply into the azure eyes that flashed defiantly. Taking the gobel tea of wine long since forgotten at his side, Itachi offered it to Naruto, who sipped the wine but wrinkled his nose in distaste of the bitter flavor. Lips stained red from the beverage, Naruto presented a delectable image. His plump lips glistened with tiny beads of the tangy wine. His kohl-lined eyes stared unblinking at Itachi. "You don't like the wine? Perhaps some milk?" Gesturing once again for the cupbearer, Itachi waited impatiently for the man to slink forward. "A cup of milk." The man returned post-haste with a cup of sweet goat milk, which Itachi offered to Naruto, who drank the smooth drink with delight. The sweet flavor of the goat milk flowed smoothly down his throat. The next few minutes proceeded in much the same manner. Itachi continued to feed Naruto, ignoring the food and drink himself. The cupbearer began to grow fidgety as he watched Itachi fail to take a single sip of the wine or a single bite of the food presented before him. His entire focus seemed centered on the blonde slave at his side. Naruto felt his stomach begin to heave. Shaking his head at another bite of food offered him, he leaned heavily against Itachi's leg. His head throbbed and his stomach heaved. His heart pounded as if he'd run several miles without stopping. Swallowing with his now very dry throat, Naruto clenched his eyes as the room began spinning despite that he was seated firmly on the ground. "Naruto?" questioned Itachi. The concern in his voice would have been touching had Naruto been able to do anything but cling desperately to Itachi's leg in a feeble attempt to ground himself. Quote, "I don't," gasped out Naruto before he began to heave, his slender body racked by the spasms. Itachi shot to his feet. "Sasuke!" he yelled over the din of the drunken feast-goers. Sasuke shot across the room towards his brother. He could tell something was very wrong by the pallor to his brother's skin. As he reached his brother, the sight of Naruto expelling the food, his body shivering violently as he clung to Itachi in desperation, sent Sasuke into action. Itachi lifted Naruto's limp body and exited the banquet hall towards his own rooms. Sasuke was barking orders to servants, but the only thing Itachi was focused on was the trembling body in his arms. Placing the normally vibrate youth on the soft material of the dais, Itachi stroked the sweat-slicked brow. Multicolored hair fell limply, and clung damply to the flesh of Naruto's brow and neck. Emptying a fruit bowl, Itachi held Naruto's head as his body expelled black-tinted mucus from his stomach before collapsing in exhaustion against the Pharaoh. The nobles are being escorted to their respective homes and a healer is en route. Is it poison? Itachi said nothing but passed the foul-smelling bowl to his brother. Sasuke's nose cled in distaste at the sight of the foamy black bile filling the bowl with every heave of tense shoulders. Naruto was panting rapidly as shivers racked his body. I fed him from my dish and he drank from my cup, stated Itachi. His eyes flashing darkly. If it is poison, it was meant for you. Find out who did this, Sasuke. I want them. Brother, it may be an impossible task. The assassin may be long gone. Itachi shot Sasuke a dark look before turning his attention once again to the blonde as he released a small whimper and clutched desperately at his stomach. Naruto began gagging and heaving over the bowl but no longer had anything left to expel. Find him. I'll see what I can do, sighed Sasuke. See that you do. Someone is going to pay for this. Find them, growled Itachi. Itachi stroked a damp cloth over Naruto's sweating brow. Pain-racked azure eyes gazed up into angry obsidian before closing once again as tremors tore through his body. Sasuke left the two and paused to address the guards at the door. No one enters that room but the healer, Gomo. Is that understood? The guards nodded understanding and Sasuke worked his way to the banquet hall where the servants, cooks, and servers were gathered. The servants quaked before Sasuke's thunderous face. Never had they seen the younger prince so angry. Something bad had happened and there would be dire consequences for the perpetrator. An attempt was made on my brother's life tonight. Someone in this room knows something and no one sees their bed tonight until that someone is found. Eyes darted back and forth as servants looked at each other with suspicion. Anyone could be the person that attempted to take the life of the god on earth. The cupbearer, who also was required to stay, looked upon the prince with a desperate panic. It was only a matter of time before the poisoned drink was found and when it was, his most painful death was assured. If you prepared the oxen, step forward. A cook stepped forward. And Sasuke offered him the slice of oxen from the pharaoh's plate. The man bowed and swallowed the meat. So the tasting began. Each preparer of the different meals was forced to taste their own creation. Soon all the food was tasted. The cooks remained unaffected by the food. Cupbearer, step forward. The cupbearer stepped reluctantly forward. His watery eyes blinked as he wrung his hands in nervousness. You provided my brother with wine and milk. Yes, Prince Sasuke. You tasted the wine as is your duty. Yes, Prince Sasuke. Taste again. The cupbearer picked up the cup of milk and drank from it as he knew it was safe. Now, the wine. The man paled visibly and Sasuke's eyes narrowed slightly. Taste the wine. With a shaking hand, the cupbearer grasped the goblet of dark wine and brought it to his lips. His eyes looked down towards the brew with fear. This was his reward for trusting that Madara would protect him if things went wrong. Taste the wine, ordered Sasuke again, his hand clenching in anger. It was obvious to him that the wine was poisoned and this man knew it. The pressure became too much and the cupbearer dropped the tainted wine on the floor and prostrated himself before Sasuke. Forgive me, Lord Sasuke. I was only doing as I was ordered. Sasuke grabbed the ornate golden chain around the neck of the man, his anger forcing the woven gold tight around the thin throat until he choked. Ghhh. Who ordered you to poison Itachi's wine? Lord Madara, stuttered the man as Sasuke released his grip on the chain. Curling his lip with disgust, Sasuke motioned with a flick of his wrist and guards surrounded the gasping man, dragging him away to await Itachi's pleasure, and Sasuke knew without a shadow of a doubt that it would be a vicious pleasure indeed. If Naruto died, it was likely that Itachi would play in the man's entrails before allowing him to die. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he dismissed the remaining servants and made his way back towards Itachi's chambers. A dark form smirked in the shadows as the prince left the room. Everything was going exactly as planned. The poison would destroy the young slave and push Itachi deeper into his madness. Then, the country would be ripe for the picking. Pushing open the door, Sasuke gazed inside to see the healer, Gomu pressing firmly on Naruto's stomach, causing a cry of pain to escape the blonde's cracked lips. I tried giving him water, but the moment anything touches his stomach, his body rejects it, murmured Itachi, and Sasuke spun around to see his brother standing against the stone wall. His arms crossed with frustration. The royal cupbearer poisoned your wine. He has been placed in custody until you decide what to do with him. Sasuke clenched his fists in anger. Itachi narrowed his eyes. A glint of anger shone from the dark depths. Whether Naruto lives or dies determines how much mercy I will have for the man. I pity the man if Naruto dies. Sasuke snorted. Don't pity him. He is below deserving of anyone's pity. He said Madara ordered him to poison your wine. Madara. Itachi released an animalistic snarl. Pharaoh. I have examined the young man and I recognize the poison. What astonishes me is that he isn't dead yet, said Gomu, as he left Naruto's side and approached the brothers. Wrong words, old man, growled Itachi as he approached the healer with fire flashing darkly in his eyes. Forgive me, Pharaoh Itachi. I meant no ill will. I have given him some ginger tea. He should be able to keep most of that down. Amazing plant, ginger. Don't tell me about plants, just heal him. There is nothing I can do. I laced his tea with a sedative. All anyone can do for that boy is pray that he lives to see the dawn. If he survives to dawn, he will have processed most of the poison. Keep giving him tea to fight off the dehydration. I've left a sachet of it at his bedside. Good evening. The old man tottered from the room, leaving Itachi and Sasuke alone. If it wasn't for the fact that Gomu was the most gifted healer in the city, Sasuke was sure Itachi would have murdered the man. As things stood, Itachi made his way back to the bed where Naruto whimpered quietly. His sleep far from restful, Itachi stroked a hand down the whiskered cheeks, marveling at their soft texture. Even at the door to the underworld, the boy had the ability to charm him. With more skill than the most gifted concubine. Itachi, should I send a servant to care for him? I will care for him. But, leave us, Sasuke. Itachi dampened a cloth once more and wiped it gently over the pallid skin of Naruto's cheeks. Sasuke bowed to his brother and quietly exited the room, offering up a prayer that Naruto would survive the night. Don't die, Naruto. You still owe me a night in my bed. The words echoed through the room. The only answer was the gasping breaths of Naruto as he struggled valiantly to hold on to his life. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.